Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney from London in the UploadVR studios as we talk about the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets today with last generation Meta avatars. We're using hand tracking with built-in microphones. We've got virtual tablets in front of us that show us notes and comments so we can interact with our audience when we're live. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. In case this is your first time, we've been following VR's development closely for more than a decade, and we expect decades of progress ahead of us. You can become a paying member at UploadVR.com to support our work directly. We thank our patrons by name here on this podcast and listed on our website. That includes XR Developer News, Podum, Holonet, Justin Corcoran at Phosphor Studios, Richard Miller, Parmesan, Nick Levac, Qubits, Steve Lucas, David Y, DePonch, Soul Presence, Soul Retreat, and Wim Reigart. David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone in the comments already. So today we're going to start by talking about a quote from Valve about the blurred lines between VR and non-VR content in the context of their decision-making around Steam Frame. We will then discuss the fact that the first integration between Quest and Discord has arrived, not a full Discord app on Quest yet, but what has arrived is the ability to share your Quest activity as your Discord status, or maybe I should say is rolling out rather than has arrived, given how Meta releases their software. Then we will discuss Meta's statement on their redirection of some funding from Metaverse towards AI glasses. So last week we discussed some of the reports around that from various news outlets. Since then, shortly after our show last week, Meta provided an official statement which confirms some things, but there's also an interesting part of that statement that seems to deny maybe part of the angle of the reporting. So we'll dig into that. We will then discuss the leaked memos from Meta. This was very early on Saturday. These memos from within Reality Labs confirm that the Ultralight headset is delayed to the first half of 2027. And separately, they confirm that Meta is now working on a gaming-focused Quest 4 again. And that comes, a couple of months after we reported on how the original candidates for Quest 4 and Quest 4S had actually been cancelled. They were set for next year, but now Meta has spun up a new project for a new kind of Quest 4. And reading between the lines, it looks like it might be, late 2027 or even 2028 when we actually see that arrive. And there's also a massive strategy shift in Quest 4 compared to every Quest headset yet that we're going to note when we get into that. Finally, we're going to talk about Android XR. So Google had a Android show XR edition where they talked about Galaxy XR, Xreal Project Aura, the software, and teased once again their take on the Meta Ray-Ban display glasses. It's now almost probably the half a dozenth time Google has teased this, and at this point we're kind of saying show us a product or stop showing us the same concepts over and over again. But that's obviously they want to be building up their hype. So specifically, we're going to talk about Android XR getting likeness, which is their equivalent of personas. Realistic face-tracked avatars for video calls. It also has a travel mode and a PC Connect first-party app for remote desktop. They also showed Xreal's Project Aura Android XR device, which is set to be the second Android XR headset. And interestingly, they confirmed the chipset in it. And there's nothing much new about it, but you do kind of see that. You see the compute puck there in the video, and a few outlets got to go hands-on with that, and you get a very good idea of what that product's going to be. And it could be a kind of dark horse of 2026 there, delivering some of the Galaxy XR experience in something that could be, notably cheaper and much, much lighter. Finally, we will talk about what I think was just a remarkable tease because it's such a huge promise in the way they said it, which is Google saying that the big feature that they're announcing for Android XR in 2026, the big software feature, is the ability to turn any 2D window into 3D in real time. And they really did mean anything, including your PC streamed. So you can be playing a flat screen PC game, using their PC Connect app or any third party software, and do this system auto spatialization. And the PC game you're playing on a flat window in your Galaxy XR is now a 3D game. We're not talking VR, but 3D. And this is not through the depth buffer. This is through just AI view synthesis. So massive, massive promise there. We'll have to see whether they deliver on that or not.
I'm looking at our comments out there. I'm seeing F Meister saying they always keep us guessing when we stream. And then Nick Levesque, Nick Levesque is, I think, the pronunciation there of our patron. So thank you out there for your support. And my apologies for getting that wrong. I practiced it a bunch of times while David was talking by muting myself in the studio. So hopefully I get your name right in the future. So thank you for that correction out there. And I appreciate Nick out there tuning in during an all hands meeting at work. So good luck on that. Big topics to get into. Ready to dive into that first one. Yeah, if you're ready. This is a big point of discussion on our website right now, UploadVR.com. So if you go and click on that URL in our description after this has been posted, you can read that and read the discussion there. It's really, really interesting to see everyone get into it there, trying to sort of wrap their heads around the differences between VR content and flat screen content, which kinds of content they prefer, where they like to prefer using that kind of content. But this quote is from Jeremy Ceylon over at Valve. I looked at it on LinkedIn and shipped the Index, the Vive, the deck, as well as a bunch of other things. So this is the person whose quote I'm going to read out here. That is sort of the core of this idea that I wanted to discuss here at the open of the show before we get into all the latest news. So as a strong Index user, quote, as a strong Index user, someone who worked on it and has spent major portions of my adult life working on that and the Vive, when I think about playing VR, I have to make an intentional choice. So I'll be like, you know what? I want to go do VR. So I go to the room that has my PC and has my base stations installed, and I start playing that. But then sometimes if I'm in another room and I'm like, well, maybe I should just take out my deck and I start playing those games. And that choice, I personally think, is one of the highest friction bits remaining. Sure, you can expect that when you put it on, because it's SteamOS, you hit the power button and you're fast into your game without the base station setup. Yeah, you can do that in any environment, but the ability to put on the headset and to see your Steam catalog in front of you where you can just choose a VR game or choose a non-VR game, it makes me play VR more. And it really reduces the impediment or the friction of even having to think about the distinction. We see the lines between VR and non-VR content really being blurred because they should just be games and you should just be able to have devices that let you enjoy them. And this is our first stab at that. Pretty interesting quote. I was putting that in context of what Apple and what Google are doing. Their experiments basically on both platforms right now that explore what you can do, blurring the lines between those types of content types. Encounter Dinosaurs is not a game over on the Apple Vision Pro. It's a portal that opens in your wall, but there's interaction and those dinosaurs see you. And you're going to feel some pretty extreme emotions in that experience, even though a portal has opened in your wall. And I just want to say that is the same thing, right? That's a blurry type of content. It's somewhere in between a game, somewhere in between not. That's Apple's version. There's versions coming out for Android XR, and we have yet to see what Valve has planned there. So I just wanted to begin this by talking about that quote, opening the space in our comments for that discussion to go over and look at the discussion over there. I really think we're so used to using VR we have in our minds the model of Beat Saber as that is what VR is. And it's kind of surprising here to see a device that is VR first, but also sit down first. And that's going to, like, not a lot of people are really happy with that idea that wait, really convince me that this is going to be used in all the places I play my current setup. I don't believe that, even though on the whole, you might use VR more because you can take it from room to room or use it laying down or use it in all these different scenarios. So, David, how are you doing? What do you think of all this? And I'll be checking the comments here.
How am I doing? Pretty tired, to be honest. There's been a lot of travel this year. There's a lot of things happening. Usually we see things winding down by December, and then we get a little time to recharge and kind of work on background projects and, get some, administrative stuff torn up. But we haven't seen that this year. It's just kept going. There's been no slowdown. It's just kept going. So that's kind of where
And
I'm
we're
at the
entering
moment.
CES. It's like we haven't even had the CES build
Exactly.
push yet. That's going to be a nightmare. Gosh,
Yep.
yeah.
So that's where I am, but it's exciting at the same time. When it comes to this, I think there's two separate discussions happening here that are kind of getting blurred, no pun intended, to the topic itself. There's the hardware side and the content side. So, in one way, we're talking about, well, when a headset isn't tethered to your PC and relying on base stations, you can take it to other parts of your home and then you can use it as well as just being able to play VR anywhere. You can start playing, flat screen games in bed or on the couch on a giant virtual screen. And that's one thing. And you can see a lot of the design ethos of Steam Frame is obviously built around this kind of hybrid capability. The controllers themselves, they're not VR first. It's clear that they've made the decision that they want them to be used for flat screen gaming just as much as VR. If you were trying to build a controller that was just the best possible VR controller, you would maybe make some other decisions, and that's an interesting trade-off. The content one is also a little bit more interesting, where it comes to the line between VR and non-VR content. Because yes, on one end you do have, playing a 2D rectangular flat screen game with a gamepad, and then on the other end, you have like Half-Life Alyx or an immersive VR game, and there is an interesting middle area here that isn't that well explored, and ironically was actually more of the focus of the first consumer VR wave with the Oculus Rift, specifically having this sort of sit-down gamepad experience that at the time the market kind of said, no, that's not what we want. We want standing up, we want track controllers. And some of that may have been, as we often talk about on this show, the technology of the time influencing what was more practical. And now, almost 10 years later, we're in a different place, right? So maybe you don't want to sit down and do these experiences where there's not much interactivity, when the headset is relatively uncomfortable, when it's low resolution. But once you do start to get the resolution and the comfort and the ability to kind of transition between different modes, then this becomes more practical. And you see that with things like UEVR, where ostensibly it's turning a flat screen game into a VR game, but it actually often does sit along that spectrum where sometimes you're actually just kind of inside the game, but you're still using the traditional controls, a mouse and keyboard or a gamepad or something like that. Where this gets interesting, I think, is, there are obviously massive rumors of like Half-Life 3 or something like that from Valve. Is this just Valve talking about what they think other third-party developers are going to do, or are we going to see Valve do something with this? Are we going to see a future Valve game that has the lines between VR or non-VR blurred? Or, despite the talk of this quote, are we going to see Half-Life Alyx and flat-screen Valve games that don't run in VR at all, unless you define, playing on a giant screen as VR?
So I'm looking over at our comments there. I'm seeing Caleb just joined, wondering if they should time travel. And hello to our time travelers out there. And we always love seeing where everyone is watching us from. I still remember our viewer out there. I don't know if they're a regular viewer or just watched us one time, but they were out there in Antarctica watching us. And that was really neat. I'm still waiting for an astronaut to watch us. And I'm waiting for an astronaut to watch us in VR. I think that would be the dream. Like, if we can get an astronaut watching us in VR, I don't care what our viewership numbers are. I don't care how much money this organization makes. I think that's the dream here is VR from space. And I think we'll get there. I think people need VR in space for various reasons. So that's my point of saying I love everyone watching us in every way, shape, and form out there. If you're watching us through a universal translator, and then there's Nick talking about CS and the idea of operating a robot or teleoperating a robot. If you go back several years now, one of our best of CS awards, I think we awarded it at CS when we still did that reliably, was Haptics. And they had a teleoperation robot in, not on the main show floor of CS. There's so many show floors in various areas all around Las Vegas. but they had this area where you put on a VR headset, and then suddenly you're basically looking out of a robot's eyes and moving, trying to grasp a cup over there with a robot. And I totally expect that to be a major theme of 2026's CES. But we saw that years ago. We need to see big steps forward in that technology.
I mean, 2025 really has. There are all of these humanoid robotics companies, which is an area, sometimes on this show we kind of hint at other areas of technology that are advancing very rapidly. Humanoid robots is an area that if you haven't been paying attention to that, you really should. The advancements in humanoid robots over the past 18 months or so have been enormous. And it is one of those technologies that, again, is going to finally come out of the realm of science fiction and into reality. And it is VR headsets that are being used not only for teleoperation, but for training, where you actually have someone wearing a headset and track controllers hand tracking or gloves, and they're able to create a robust data set that they can be trained on. And yes, in many ways, you do have teleoperation. The first home humanoid robot was actually pre-orders opened for it a couple of weeks ago. And they have said, I think it's something like $500 a month or $20,000 outright. And they have actually said that this thing is going to, much of the time, operate autonomously, but when it runs into a task that it doesn't have a solution for, or when it has some sort of issue, someone will teleoperate it. They will be operating a robot in your home using a VR headset, and that's something that you buy it knowing. And I think that's going to be the case for the first wave of humanoid robots. You will have people doing this. There's a very funny video from the past week where you see one of these humanoid robots and you watch it go like this. You take the headset off and fall over. The person teleoperating it had to, for whatever reason, quickly take their headset off, and the robot just fell over.
If I know, I would love to confirm. Like, I want to talk to that operator, and like, I don't need to name you, right? Like, I'll protect your anonymity, but I need to know that actually happened, and I need to know what it felt like to realize that the robot fell over after you pulled the headset off, and what the actual shutdown protocol is for logging out of your robot, because there has to be a whole protocol there. I love Brandon out there was a time traveler going at 2x speed, and caught up to us at the exact moment that I basically addressed all of our time travelers. So hello to all of you out there. I love that. And yes, we do expect the teleoperation to be such a huge thing. I want to, like, hey, come on. If you're if you're a telerobotics company, bring me to CES. I'm not going to travel there. I've got plenty of headsets at home. Let me operate your robot from New York. That's how I would prefer to go to CES.
That would be very interesting.
All right.
Yeah. Let's get on to our first news topic then of this week. So the first thing we want to talk about is the first integration between Meta Quest, or the Meta Horizon platform technically, and Discord. So Meta is now rolling out the ability to link your Meta account to your Discord. And what this will do, if you want it to do so, is show up on your Discord status that you are in a Quest game, just like you may have set up already on PC or whatever platform. I think Xbox has it now. It's very common for gamers to want to kind of broadcast their current playing status. There's not that much to say about this other than this is what it does. It does this one thing. Meta has obviously announced at Connect 2025 that at some point in 2026, there will be a Discord app on Quest that is coming, but this is kind of the first stage of that, is just being able to share what you're playing. And I'm sure there are some people who very much so would not want this for the obvious reasons, but there are plenty of people who love to share this kind of thing, like what they're playing and such.
Very much a you did this to yourself situation, if that happens, of course, right? And you're actually speaking to a reason why I don't install Discord on certain devices to that point. So, I mean, yeah, this is, of course, right, taking your crew or taking your channel that you have in a Discord area through your entire journey inside the headset is the dream here, right? When do we get that specifically?
That's a good question. So on Xbox, Microsoft has been kind of tightening the integration with Discord. We don't yet know what the integration is going to be like on Quest, whether it's just going to be, being in a Discord call in the background, or maybe is there a more rich presence? Can you click on your PC, join here, like right click join and then open your headset and be there in Beat Saber. Technically these things are possible, but we don't yet know. That's why there's not a lot to discuss about this story, because it's also vague at this point. There will be a Discord app on Quest in 2026. Beyond that, we don't know.
Yeah. I do, Nick sort of pointing out, just a bunch of people showing they're in the browser. And the thing about, like, I made this joke, I think, on a previous podcast, but somewhere in one of my Google accounts, I set my status as VR back in 2014 or something, when I sort of realized that this was what I wanted to focus my career on. And like, I just left it there because I stopped using the chat program, GChat or whatever it was, around the same time as a chat program, period. And so it just sits there as my active status that I'm in VR and have been for the last decade. It's useful to tell people this is where you are right now. And if on a Google, the ironic thing there is the first time I went back in there and noticed all that was in the Galaxy XR headset, right? Because I logged in on that account and you could go into the Google app and I could try to make a call as an avatar from the headset and say, "Here, I made it. I left here in 2014 and I'm here now." And it's very useful. One of the biggest things I have trouble with right now on Vision Pro is knowing who I could get into a headset right now to watch a movie with me.
That's a great point, actually. There is a usefulness to activity status that's maybe not even as specific as this. For example, my understanding is that on iPhone, if someone has Do Not Disturb on and you go into iMessage, it will kind of say their Do Not Disturb is on. It would be great to have is currently in Vision Pro. For this, for example, I haven't had this roll out to my headset yet, but I wonder, right now on Meta Horizon, you can choose to either just show that you're online or show what you're in. I wonder if you just show the online, will this just say, in Meta Horizon or in Quest? That would be maybe more useful, because is, again, as you say, the use here to signal to people who are trying to communicate with you. And obviously, yes, on the Google platform, you'd want to be able to do that for, Google Messages and perhaps even something like Gmail. I mean, I would find it useful for Slack if we could automatically show, when you're in VR rather than having to mark it, but I don't see that integration coming anytime soon.
Arlen out there remembering Google Talk and he had forgotten about it, and also wondering why everyone all stopped using it all at once. You remember how quickly Skype died and was consumed by Zoom? It was pretty much in a span of 3 months that the story was over for video chat platforms there. We ready to move on here to the next one, or is there anything else here in the comments that you want to talk about? Hello to all of our time shifters, everyone catching up.
Yeah, I was just going to note that Google has had so many chat platforms at this point. It was a common joke. There was Allo and GChat and Talk, and there was a point where they had 3. Now they have kind of sort of converged it down to 2, but it's still a mess. And Google was never able to figure out social. That was the one thing.
I didn't interrupt you.
Sorry, I was just saying Google was never able to figure out social. It was the one thing that they always kind of had this envy of Meta for. Meta obviously envies Google in many ways, but the one way in which Google always just wished they could figure out Meta was social. And there was this story of back when they launched Google Plus against Facebook, there was this all hands attempt to say, we really want to have a social platform. But if you think about what Google has, it has everything but. You could argue Gmail is, but it's not really in the same sense. And so, Apple has its iMessage and FaceTime. Facebook obviously has, Meta has Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram. And with Google, sure, you use Android messages, but that's not really the same thing.
People are already talking about the Game Awards, and we're not going to do any pre-speculation there, or at least not much, hopefully. But it's kind of like the elephant in the room hanging over our broadcast is what's going to be in that show. So we don't know what's going to be in the show. I have no idea. I do think the timing is right for Meta to make a really big statement about a game they have coming deep in the future. They don't have anything on the timeline right now for a game deep in the future that's a big budget. So like EA or someone getting funded to bring a big game down the line would be a cool reveal.
Maybe. I think it's too early after Deadpool. I think Meta's focus is still on just talking about marketing Deadpool, right? It's obviously been less than a month since it released.
Do we want to talk about Bosworth's note that just dropped on his little like what's coming in 2026 note, because that didn't provide me a lot of Meta is still investing in gaming. Like it gave the impression of it, but there needs to also be like, what does the future of gaming look like at Meta?
It was very vague. I don't think, I don't think any of his past notes have said that. Again, I just want to point out that we always talk about Meta as if it's the company that's not investing in VR gaming, and it is the one that's just dropped Deadpool VR. If you were to talk to someone who knows nothing about the industry and say, well, company A has, launched a Batman Arkham game last year and a Deadpool game today, and, company B has launched no games in 6 years, company C has launched, a few games 2 years ago, they'd say, well, surely the conversation about who's really invested in VR gaming will all be about B and C, but no, it's A. And I always say this, I expect that we will see in the summer the announcement of whatever the next game is, whatever the next company is working on, the next studio within Meta, because that's been this thing we've seen so far, right? We've seen Arkham Shadow and Deadpool both announced during the summer, and I doubt we'll see a difference. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think it's not a. You're right about the overall criticism thing. That's not the criticism being levied at Meta for like their story here is reliable investment in VR gaming. They have that story to tell. They have a 10-year story of it. What I'm saying is we don't have any future path written for us right now, and there are bad headlines suggesting contraction of a lot of resources. So making a statement here that we are still investing in this reliable release schedule of top tier content that we're throwing money at. You look at his comment, like that note, one of the things that he says, lots of things don't work. There are dead ends. So you could cut out the dead end comment and make it really doomy and gloomy. Or you could say, no, we're still doubling down on this again. And yeah, I don't think we have that word of doubling down, even if you're absolutely right about Meta having this story of reliable investment. You ready to move on?
I was just going to bring up Nick Tater's comment that, we were the outlet that kind of picked up on the confirmation of Arkham Shadow 2. So we haven't heard anything about that being cancelled. And we had that voice actor a couple of months ago saying that there is a Batman Arkham Shadow 2 in development. We would hear it if there were. We'll get into the next topic because I think it's very relevant. It actually is completely heavily relevant, and that is, Meta confirming that it is shifting some funding from Metaverse towards AI glasses. Let me just read out the full statement. It's not that long. Within our overall Reality Labs portfolio, we are shifting some of our investment from Metaverse towards AI glasses and wearables, given the momentum there. We aren't planning any broader changes than that. So there's two actual parts of this statement, which is interesting to me. Reality Labs, if you're not familiar, it's the part of Meta that does Quest and glasses and such. Meta defines wearables, to be clear. We've had this discussion before, as like wristbands and glasses, not the headset. So Quest is not a wearable in this context. It's more the broader industry definition of wearables that was all about, fitness and Apple Watch and things like that. I think, you count AirPods are counted as wearables. VR headsets aren't for some reason normally, though they are in some people's definition. It's another one of those things where it's quite blurry. So the confirmation here, this is the direct confirmation from Meta after our last week's discussion that, if you caught it, you'll remember, is that they are shifting some investment from capital M Metaverse, capital M, towards AI glasses and wearables. The confusing part here is that Meta has used capital M Metaverse to mean multiple things. Sometimes Mark Zuckerberg will use it to mean everything in Reality Labs. So smart glasses will be Metaverse for Mark Zuckerberg. He means by Metaverse, he just means everything other than, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. Other times it will be about Quest and Horizon. And then at times it will be just about Horizon Worlds. So it's actually quite confusing. Since the initial report last week, we've seen multiple outlets come out with their own reports. They're all a little bit contradictory, and none of them are quite specific, because I think they're all facing the same confusion of what the F does this word metaverse mean. But the idea, the vibe I get here, and reading between the lines and trying to understand what's going on and talking to people who may understand, is that Horizon Worlds is going to be the main victim of this funding shift, and that within the kind of strategy of Meta, they are not going to be just throwing infinite money at Horizon Worlds anymore, and it is going to be about making it a more sustainable business and putting that funding back into kind of smart glasses, which is something they want to scale up, right? They do not want to lose the first mover momentum. They know competition is coming. Google is coming with a platform for Gemini glasses that is going to take on Meta directly. Meta wants to accelerate their first mover advantage and their position as number one in smart glasses. And it looks like redirection of Horizon Worlds. I think we should probably talk about the other story at the same time here, because it all kind of feeds in. So alongside this reporting, we have these two leaked memos at Reality Labs, which suggest that the Ultralight headset with a tethered compute puck that will run Horizon OS, Phoenix is the code name, will be delayed to 2027. And that's not absurd or ridiculous. It does sound, based on the memos here, that it's a decision being made because they want to make sure it's polished. They don't think it's going to be ready for next year. They want this to be something that, the reviews are good. They want the quality to be good. They don't. The nightmare scenario is they push it out with unfinished software and it gets, shit all over, and then 6 months later the software is good but nobody cares anymore because the attention's gone. The more interesting revelation of these memos that are leaked from Meta is that they have started work on a gaming-focused Quest 4, but specifically, these memos suggest that it will not be subsidized. So their plan is to, as part of this big move from getting Reality Labs from a completely horrendously unprofitable division into something that is eventually profitable, is the ending of subsidization. Because a big part of this, Red, is actually the costs that are involved in subsidizing these headsets. You can debate, depending on how you define it as an accountant, whether Quest headsets are sold at cost or a loss, right? It depends. Do you just count their immediate costs and manufacturing? Do you count logistics and shipping? Do you count marketing? Do you count development? Do you count content? Do you count Batman Arkham Shadow as part of the subsidization? But what's quite clear is that these Quest headsets today, even if they're sold slightly for more than they cost to make in terms of Quest 3, for example, they're not a profitable product for Meta, and that is the idea here from these memos. They talk about this being a large upgrade over Quest 3, so we're talking about Quest 4 now, but having significantly improved unit economics, which means that they are no longer losing Meta significant money. That's the big shift I expect to see. Timeline-wise, we're talking probably, late 2027 at the earliest, 2028. So we're going to see a pretty massive gap between Quest 3 and Quest 4. We're talking, 4 or 5 years, but it is also going to be a massive upgrade that is more premium. And specifically, we're talking about a higher price. We are not going to see another $300 Meta headset. Again, that's not going to happen. It's going to be a profitable headset when it does arrive, and that's one of the biggest shifts in strategy we've ever seen from Meta. It ends a decade of hardware subsidization as their primary strategy.
The thing I was thinking about regarding the timing is, does it give a window both to competitors as well as to Horizon's own third-party headsets that they plan? Is if 2026 is being vacated by Meta's first-party hardware, does that leave room for the other third-party Horizon OS headsets that have whatever price points Meta's partners want to throw at the wall?
That's a great question. I think we're at the point where we really need to hear something about these now, given all this strategy shift. We have not had in quite a long time a confirmation that this is actually being worked on. It has been, we're going to come up to, in April, 2 years since this announcement. I think at CES, if we don't see anything from Asus or Lenovo, we need to start questioning, are these things still happening? It is. I have been one of the first people to kind of say that we don't need to immediately assume this. It does take years to build these headsets, but at some point you do have to wonder, where are these? Why haven't we seen even the slightest tease? it would be a kind of for the people in our audience saying, wow, 2028, 5 years from Quest 3, am I going to be with my Quest 3 until then if I want to be in the Horizon ecosystem, the Horizon Store ecosystem?
Mm-hmm.
And a Asus ROG gaming headset would be the gap filler. And we've been talking about that even since we reported earlier this year that the original candidate for Quest 4 for 2026 had been, cancelled. This has been the big move. There will be a lot of people that I think do just move out of the ecosystem if you get to that level.
Yeah.
We're still having a Quest 3 from 2023, into 2027. It's going to be, Asus is going to be the one to watch next year if you are in the Meta ecosystem.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, David. And you can imagine that they've left such a big hole for something like OLED in their ecosystem, right? And that there's a lot of people out there who have Quests who are hungry for an OLED of any kind, and it's the most obvious thing to stab Valve with at this moment in time. Whatever the price, right? I guess Google already kind of did it with its display technology, but like you ship something like that in the Quest ecosystem, you have a very big differentiator from what Valve is doing. I want to throw out value. I want to throw up the idea of value and owning something of value in virtual reality. I what do we own when we're in virtual reality? We own our experience, maybe? Like that's like philosophically, but I mean like objects, places, games in some instances. Yeah, I've got a list of games that I've purchased from the MetaQuest store that I have entitlements that give me access to whenever I'm logged into a Meta account. I also have thousands of dollars worth of games inside of the Steam OS ecosystem with, lots and lots of content there. And the content that is inside the Quest ecosystem, I'll buy Walkabout Mini Golf on another platform. I'm fine. I've already invested in it multiple times on multiple platforms. I don't mind buying those courses again on another platform. Other than that, I don't. Beat Saber, I don't need to buy it. Like if I never played Beat Saber again, okay. Like I don't miss it is what I'm saying. And there's a lot of stuff I would miss inside my Steam library. And that's what I'm talking about when I say value. Like what of value do we lose if people start stopping if the Quest 3 goes in the closet, right? Fantastic Contraption is the game that has been on my mind lately. I would be curious to see how many people out there have played Fantastic Contraption. A brilliant game from 2016 that shipped with the HTC Vive. And if you go and look at it on Steam, it's at like 50 reviews. 50 reviews. And this game is a brilliant piece of VR technology. And I don't know if it's going to run on the Steam frame next year well. I don't know in what scenarios it's going to run on the Steam frame well in. I expect Valve to send me a headset at some point next year, and I'm going to launch Fantastic Contraption. I'm going to find out. And the sad thing about this is what I'm trying to get at here, the long thing. I might care more about this than the developers of some of these games. Some of these developers may have moved on. So the actual onus here is on Valve to make all of these things work in a standalone form factor, or just leave it as Steam Frame unsupported, right? And then you're streaming it from your PC. And that's not what I want or what I expect, but I'll be happy with it. I'll get by with it. And it's still, my point like there is that fallback of streaming Fantastic Contraption from my PC is still more valuable to me than a lot of the stuff that I've purchased on the Quest ecosystem.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things you bring up here. Firstly, I just want to stress, as we always kind of forget in our enthusiast bubbles, that most people who own a VR headset today, it's their first headset. And so they don't have, a past library from a different headset. They have whatever they have today. And most people who buy a Quest do not own a gaming PC. So they don't have that option to stream from their PC. They don't own a gaming PC. When it comes to this thing about library and value, This is something that is not unique to VR. It's a wider issue in gaming. If I have an Xbox 360 and then I get a PlayStation 4, well, I've lost my Xbox library. If I, go from Nintendo Switch to PlayStation, or, PlayStation to Switch 2, all of these things don't transfer over. Steam, the Steam library is obviously incredibly valuable if you're a PC gamer, but if you're not, then it isn't, because you didn't have a Steam library, and these things are kind of the trend there. That's the concern here. The issue is, if you have a platform and there's no new hardware for it, then it becomes less valuable, and people want to shift over even with that loss of all of their content. In a pessimist worst case scenario that ASUS cancels its headset and Quest 3 is sitting there on the market as the option for Horizon OS gaming until 2028 or whatever, then you do get people to start to shift over and say, even though I do have all my content here, even though again, Beat Saber is one of the best selling games and VR games of all time, so a lot of people would miss it. They maybe have bought a lot of game or music on it, but even still, they'll move on eventually. So at some point, you do need hardware to keep it not steal. But again, this is the pessimist scenario. It is very possible that ASUS does launch a headset as a kind of stopgap until then.
Have you ever used the Movies Anywhere service?
Yeah, I'm aware of it.
But you've never like logged in multiple accounts to get. So I've invested, like, I don't know, a dozen movies on one platform and hundreds of movies in another platform, and it's really frustrating to go like, oh no, I got to go log into another account to get this movie. And so this Movies Anywhere service basically syncs you up into one library, but I believe at the cost of some privacy. I believe there's some tracking over your play data in aggregate, maybe, I don't know, but I did see some language in their privacy policy when you sign up for the service. But that's currently today. The year is 2025. December almost ending. We're going into 2026. It's been 20. It's that we were peer-to-peer pirating music back at the turn of the century, 25 years ago, right? And now we purchase our music from stores, we purchase our movies from stores, we purchase our games from stores.
No, most people subscribe to Spotify or Apple Music and they get every song ever made. No, people don't buy music anymore. That's not something that really happens en masse.
Fair enough. That's almost like describing the late stage capitalism of the process, right? Okay, so we're on to subscription music, right? In that process, and Microsoft is trying to make subscription gaming a thing, right?
Yes. And I would say movies and TV are probably in the middle, where a lot of people just watch what's on their streaming platform. They watch, Netflix or Prime Video or Disney Plus, but then there is a little bit of purchasing. But games are one of the last kind of digital media where purchasing is the primary way. And as you say, yes, Microsoft is trying to shift that. Meta, in a way, is trying to shift that with Horizon Plus, but we do still see gaming as one of the last areas of kind of purchasing. And even then, you can debate about, do you really own it or is it a license, etc.
Yeah, there it is. Are we leasing our games? Out there in our comments? They're echoing you, David. And CMO sells you a limited time license. Yeah, and I'm buying a bunch of my games on GOG.com too, for the same purpose, right? Like, I'm thinking about this long term. There is an open, we're all kind of like aware of the openness path that's here and how quickly our memories, like the places we love to go, can be taken away from us, right? I think that's what I'm getting at here, right? I loved to go to Fantastic Contraption, and I would love to go back at any random time. And that's what I mean of value. And more, Meta has bulldozed things of value in their ecosystem multiple times. Those Oculus homes were things of value that were killed by the platform for platform reasons. Echo VR, same thing.
And achievements as well. There are people that are still very mad about that to this day, that they got rid of achievements on Quest. That is the huge trade-off of these digital entitlements, especially the free ones, right? At least with the paid stuff. Generally, these companies will try to keep it alive for as long as possible. And in some cases, you'll get like a refund and such like that. But with the free stuff, it's anyone's, it can go at any time. It can just disappear. On Steam Frame, I want to pick up on what you said there, because I do think it is going to be the biggest issue for Steam Frame in terms of a potential buyer really grappling with what the product is, if you're not someone who is highly technical and kind of really understands on a deep level what's going on. We always have to remember that outside our bubble, people's knowledge of what these products are and how they work is not going to be anywhere near what the knowledge of a VR download viewer is. So for a lot of people, they are going to be confused as to, when I get a Steam frame, what Steam VR games can I play without a PC? What do I need a PC for? You're bringing up these HTC Vive launch games, and it's a great question. We don't know is the answer. The solution that Valve has come up with for Steam Deck is Steam Deck verified. For Steam Frame, it's going to be Steam Frame verified as well, but it's a lot more tough of a situation because Steam Deck plays a trick, and I mean that in a good way, not a bad way, to play all of your Steam library, and that is that it renders at 800p. It's a low resolution screen. People are wondering, why isn't it 1080p on the Steam Deck? It's on purpose because it means that on a handheld, it doesn't matter that much compared to on a giant TV, and it means that you have a lot fewer pixels to render, so you can actually match the performance of a console that's then running, or a PC that's running at 1080p or 4K. In VR, that trick doesn't work. A headset being standalone doesn't mean that it gets to magically render at a lower resolution and look relatively the same. It's not a different form factor in terms of the display. You're still seeing, all of these pixels magnified over your field of view. So this is the kind of issue here. The Steam Frame Verified program is going to be very, very important. We are going to be, jumping in. When we think about our coverage, how are we going to cover the launch of Steam Frame? One of the things we're going to have to communicate is to give you an idea and give, people coming to UploadVR.com an idea of what can I run on this? What is Steam Deck Frame? What's Steam Frame Verified? What did no one ever bother to check if it's Steam Frame Verified? And it's going to be a tough,
And
because
how does it
there are
break?
going to be people who buy this headset and they go in and they try to run, Skyrim VR and find out it runs at 20 frames per second, and they say, "Oh, what is going on? Is this broken? I don't understand this." It's going to be inherently a little bit more of an enthusiast product versus Quest or PlayStation VR 2, where you go onto a game in PSVR 2 or Quest and you know that it was built for either your headset or the headset before yours, in which case yours is, better. In many ways, you will go onto a Steam VR and you'll launch a game that was made for, the HTC Vive running on a PC, or maybe it was made for, Quest 2 people running on a PC. It's going to be a little bit of a mess, but that's inherent to PC gaming. It is very much so a PC gamer's standalone headset in that sense.
There's a model for interaction inside of Steam Frame and inside of Steam Machine and inside of Steam Deck. I guess it would be in all three simultaneously, that I am very curious to see if devs explore. The moment that keeps coming to mind as I try to model this out in my mind is being in the middle of Breath of the Wild and standing in the middle of the whole world on the middle open platform. You're looking up the big castle right in front of us, and you're standing there with a Steam Deck in your hand. And when you hold up the Steam Deck, it becomes a scope that lets you look and zoom in at the locations far away. And then when you press a button on the Steam Deck, magnesis, which is one of the core powers of the game, activates, and you grab something near you with the magnetic powers, and you're moving it around with your Steam Deck around Breath of the Wild, and then you're releasing the button, and there it falls. I think that model might require some kind of handoff of all three of these systems in order for it to run, or for me to do the same thing in Skyrim VR that you just said would probably run at 15 frames per second in standalone VR. But if I've got 100 gigabytes of RAM running over on that Steam machine over there, I don't know how much, if it's upgradable, I can't remember. Let's say it's not a Steam machine. Let's say this is a custom built machine going far beyond what a Steam machine can do, and it's running Steam OS with the dongle attached, right? And I've put in every mod inside of inside of Skyrim VR imaginable over on that machine. And now I'm doing the same thing in Skyrim, where I'm like grabbing objects with my Steam Deck and moving it around as my tool. And I'm using it as my mini map right here, right? I'm looking down and seeing my mini map on it and all the other things that it's accessible to. I've thrown out a million different interaction ideas here, but I still think, Like if there are problems with my design, I apologize, but I think the overall concept is solid. There is some magic to be played here between holding an object like a Steam Deck or a Nintendo Switch or a Sheikah Slate in your hand while doing something else in VR.
Yeah, there's certainly going to be a lot of modders trying out all of these kind of things. I think just coming back to the general idea of, Skyrim VR and having your PC over there, and we're just using that as a random game example, to be clear. It's not anything special in this context. I think there is a very good reason that Valve described Steam Frame as a PC streaming first product. And that's the first thing you'll see when you go to the Steam Frame webpage on Steam. It's the first thing they said to us at Valve when they started to describe the product. We used it for our headline for a reason. It is Quest 3 is a standalone first headset that can also do PC VR. Steam Frame is a PC VR first headset that can also do some standalone stuff. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that kind of how that changes over time. I see someone asking, will the Steam Frame and Steam Deck Verified be lumped together? No, Valve has confirmed to us that these will be separate tags. Again, for the reasons I described, because a Steam Deck is running at 800p, the Steam Frame is running at the same resolution that you would be doing PC VR, roughly, right?
Yeah, can I comment on that? It's actually, it broke my brain at Valve. It broke my brain after. It's taken me weeks to process it. You put on the Steam Frame. Only some of the games that work on Steam Deck are going to necessarily work on your Steam Frame. Only a subset of them. So like it's not going to help you that things will be that are Steam Deck verified. You can't automatically assume it's going to work in flat mode while on your headset.
Yeah, but you need to remember this. Steam Frame is less powerful than Steam Deck. That's something that I don't think a lot of people have kind of really taken to heart. It is not a magical headset that is taking a gaming PC and putting it onto a 10-watt chip. That's not possible. It is less powerful than your Steam Frame and than your Steam Deck, and yet it has to not just run the game on a giant virtual screen, but also render the VR environment background, handle your controller tracking and head tracking, and all of that kind of system level stuff, as well as the fact that you're running it on an enormous screen, so that if you wanted to just use the same resolution as Steam Deck 800p, it's going to look a lot worse. So look, you're not going to be playing Cyberpunk standalone on Steam Frame. I see a comment here asking, do you need a PC for a Steam Frame? And this is the really complicated thing about communicating this product. No, you don't. And Steam Frame, well, you don't need it. But if you want to run certain games on Steam at anything above 5 frames per second, you will. This is the complexity here. It's not a console. It's not. It is like getting a gaming laptop and saying, can I play everything on Steam? It depends on what's the spec of the laptop. It's this PC gaming world. So this is the thing that, again, we have to be really, really careful about. Steam Frame can run everything asterisk, 99% of things on Steam. Let's just say if for 99%, we can round it up for the sake of this conversation. It can run everything on Steam, but it can't run everything on Steam well. You can get a Walmart laptop for $300 and run anything on Steam too, but it's not going to run well. So that's the complexity here. In many cases, you're going to want to use your PC. There are also going to be many games that will run standalone, and every week developers right now are there's two different models they run. They either make a Steam Frame dedicated version of their VR game, which is essentially the Quest version, but ported into either the same Steam Store build as an Android APK or as a separate Steam Store build. Some developers are exploring that, right? They have the PC VR one for your big 600-watt gaming PC, and then they have a Steam Frame one. That's one of the kind of approaches there. The other approach is that they make a kind of ultra low graphics mode that's essentially the kind of Steam Frame one. So this is such a mess because it's not even consistent between what developers are going to do. You can see that our big struggle in 2026 is going to be how on earth do we communicate this to people who are just getting into VR and have no idea what's going on. Valve is going to struggle with it. We're going to struggle with it. It's going to be a mess.
I'm just going to guess here. Valve would actually have these numbers, and I don't think they're in the hardware survey because this is software, right? But let's guess that 70% of people who use Steam, when they launch their headset and they hit they when they put on their headset, let's say that 70% of them see Steam VR Home when they do that, and then they launch their games from Steam VR. I'd wager, let's just say 1/3 or a small portion of those people are just launching straight into games or launching into the compositor layer like nothing around them. But Steam VR Home, right? Like we don't even know if Steam VR Home, the thing that most people probably experience first inside of every Vive, Index, and all the other headsets that connect to Steam VR over the last decade, right? We don't even know if that runs performantly on this headset, right? And so like that's and you can do anything you want with Steam VR Home, right? Like I'm talking about the base window, the base experiences that they actually ship with the thing. Those we don't know if those are going to run well. So that's one example of things that we have to wait and see. And here's the problem that I'm trying to sort out here, right? Let me think about this. We're on version 83. Today this morning I had my headset upgrade from 81 to 83, and it caused me a problem in a piece of software that I was aiming to review and write about for UploadVR.com. I had to go into the settings of the Quest menu and turn on and turn off again the auto switching from hands to controllers so that it would just leave my controller down and stop using it as an input system so that I could interact with a game using hands only. That was this morning, borked on the Quest ecosystem, and it actually made reviewing our audience has a lot of really amazing devs in it. And like we try to do right by them as often as we can when analyzing their virtual worlds, right? And I'm like, the first moment of my day, how many years into the Quest ecosystem are we? 6, 7 years? The first moment of today was an OS update that broke a game I needed to write about for our website, right? What does the next 3 years of updates look like on Steam Frame, and how often does it break a game versus how much does it improve the performance of a game?
Yeah, those are good questions, and we're only going to be able to find out in the future. Coming back to this kind of Steam frame performance thing, I'm seeing a lot of our comments kind of go into that. I see Tyler Johnson saying, if you stick the Steam machine, so the little kind of box console thing, on your belt and call it standalone, that played PC VR games. So the Steam machine is a 300 watt roughly device. You can put it on your belt, but it's going to have to then have a giant cable going off to the wall to a power socket. Or I guess you could wear a giant backpack full of a battery, and you can do the calculations yourself for how long that would last. It's not, you can't, it's going to be you're not going to be able to wear a Steam machine. I'm going to put it that way. Maybe with a super weird backpack, but this is again what we always try to get across, or I tried to get across, which is like the fundamental physics of what's the difference between a gaming PC and a mobile chipset. And it is down to 300 watts versus 10 watts. There is no magic standalone PC VR from a performance perspective. There is no magic snap your fingers and you get a gaming PC on your head. That's just not how reality works. I see another question here from the same person that asked whether they need a PC for Steam Frame, I believe, saying, so coming from Quest without a PC, is Steam Frame even worth it? I just want to play games on Steam library that Quest does not have. That's a great question, and something that, again, in our Steam Frame launch coverage, we will be digging into. We will be kind of saying, as a PC gamer, is this worth it? As a standalone Quest gamer, is it worth it? Initially, I'm going to tell you, if buy games on Steam that Quest doesn't have, you're talking about things like, Flight Simulator and DCS and Elite Dangerous and kind of Fallout 4 VR, Skyrim VR, Star Wars Squadrons, Half-Life Alyx. Every single game I just mentioned is not going to run well on Steam Frame Standalone, with the one exception there being Valve has talked about exploring the idea of kind of downporting Half-Life Alyx to Steam Frame, but that is not something that they have even said. The fact that they're talking about it and they didn't demo it suggests to me that that's not going to happen at launch, if it does ever happen at all. I would say fundamentally, we can't answer your question yet. But if your idea is that you get a Steam Frame and you start playing all the games I just mentioned and you start playing all of these high fidelity PC VR games, that's not what the product is. Steam Frame is not magically give you a PC without a PC. You're going to need a PC. If you want to do this, just get a gaming PC.
Yeah. All right. So, David directly answered the question. Now I'm going to philosophically answer the question. That same person. I saw it on Reddit. I saw this discussion on Reddit that formulated that echoed my own internal thinking on this. There's a whole bunch of games on Steam that I have put hundreds of hours into. Stardew Valley, Dome Keeper, FTL. It's just, you could probably learn a lot about who I am as a gamer, the kind of person I am. It's just these little work games that let me just mine away and get a little bit better and find little things in corners. Hundreds of hours in those games. If those don't get Steam Frame verified, if those don't get the Steam Frame verified label, and by Steam Frame verified here, I mean flat screen at a high frame rate, and interacting with my controllers. If I don't get those three games, I don't want a Steam Frame.
So I think those are the games that are actually going to be ideal for Steam Frame. Everything you just mentioned, my understanding of these games, these are like mostly 2D games that would run on anything. These are going to run incredibly well on Steam Frame. It's going to be amazing to be able to, for example, bring up the Steam build of Stardew Valley and play on a giant screen, or maybe it's Terraria or some other 2D game. And there's obviously going to be simplistic 3D games as well, but I actually think this is going to be one of the biggest strengths of Steam Frame, is that you can bring up Stardew Valley and play it completely standalone. So again, when I just started to talk about imagining games like Cyberpunk and Arc Raiders or whatever you want to play, the kind of games that you need like a PS5 or a PC for, that's where I say, you're badly misunderstanding the fundamental physics here if you think that these are going to run on a mobile chipset. But when it comes to the ones you just mentioned, that's amazing. That is actually exactly what you're going to be able to do. You're going to be able to take your Steam Frame on a plane and play Stardew Valley with no other device than just the Steam Frame on the flight. And that is actually something that is a really amazing part of the product, I think.
And so if you start thinking about, so David has a 3,000 word article of mine to edit. I've been waiting for his feedback. Can't wait for you all to read it once I get his feedback integrated into the piece. But it's going into exactly what we've ended up at this discussion. And I want to like, Onakazi is one of our hardcore regular VR download readers. We see them in the audience almost every week. So thank you for tuning in, Onakazi. And Onakazi is sort of picking apart my words from before and saying, what is high frame rate to you? And I appreciate you, Onakazi, for at the same time, I'm not going to answer your question. I specifically was vague in my referencing of high frame rate here to try to make space for this, for Nicholas out here who's asking basic questions here about VR. High frame rate to a VR user is not the same as high frame rate to a flat screen VR gaming user. And I need to be really careful when we're talking about those differences here in the value that's going to be brought to the table here. There are plenty of gamers out there that have not experienced anything ever above 30, and they've often experienced dips way below 30 on all their platforms that they've played on. That's the minimum bar that we need to start talking about value being added to.
Yeah, look, to come back to the frame rate, I would be shocked if Stardew Valley doesn't run at 144 on Steam Frame. I think that's a great example of a game that probably will. We'll have to see. I can't make promises like that, but we'll have to see how it kind of pans out. I see Nick Tater asking on my idea of ultra low graphic settings, how do we know that something like Skydance Behemoth doesn't already have a low graphic setting that would run on Steam Frame? Again, I really think you're really overestimating the power of a 10-watt mobile chipset. Even the lowest set graphic setting on the PC VR build of a game like Skydance Behemoth is higher fidelity than the Quest 3 kind of graphical fidelity, which is, again, you have to understand that there's just a massive gulf between what a 500-watt gaming PC can do and what a 10-watt mobile chipset can do. It really is enormous. Like, it's amazing what developers are able to do on standalone, but it takes unbelievably hard work on optimization. Something like Batman Arkham Shadow, they essentially built their own Unity scriptable rendering pipeline. They basically built their own pipeline. If you look at, for example, Red Matter and Red Matter 2, they modified Unreal Engine heavily. They had changed some of the fundamental rendering tech. This is not just the engine out of the box. So some of the best examples of graphics on Quest are because the developers spent years and are highly experienced low-level graphics engineers that went deep into the engine and optimized every tiny little thing to get every frame. Like we often talk about the big screen philosophy of every gram matters. Well, if you want to deliver excellent graphics on a mobile chipset in VR, you have to have every frame matters. Every millisecond matters, to be kind of technical about it. And PC games don't have to do that. There is this kind of scenario where most games on Steam, they are not heavily optimized because you have so much power in your gaming PC that it's okay to ride that, and it's okay to say, we're not going to spend more time on these low-level optimizations that we could be spending on all of these other things that people want. The less power you have in a machine, the more you have to do that. Mindweaver is saying, I believe Steam Frame will be able to play more than just 2D games. Absolutely, of course it will. I'm just saying it's not going to play high-fidelity 3D games. It's not going to play Cyberpunk on anything other than, the lowest settings in resolution. It's just not. Try to run Cyberpunk. You can get tools and software that will let you run Windows on an Android phone today. Go and do that and try to run something like Cyberpunk and see what happens. Obviously, with Steam Frame, FX is going to be a lot more efficient than these kind of emulators, but still, I'm going to say it over and over again. I apologize that I'm saying it so often, but you cannot magically turn a 10-watt mobile chipset into a 200-watt console or 500-watt PC.
Two things I want to address there. So David has done explaining that, like the wattage. I need to address that in a minute. What I want to say first is I want to actually address Valve out there directly. We don't blame Valve if they don't watch us. Why would they? We're in MetaQuest. We're not using a single bit of their software. There's no reason for them to be interested in the VR show that isn't using their system. Now, one of our questions for them was, what about developing this place for that system, right? Because David is the developer of this, where we are right now. He should develop, like we could exist inside Steam Frame. This could be a much more comfortable experience with a lot less weight in there. Hypothetically, I might have to get the controllers if the hand tracking isn't there.
Yeah.
But that would be an interesting trade-off. Where I'm going with this is next year we have a crazy task. It seems to be forming for us. And we've been David is talking about being tired. I'm tired. We all are extremely tired with just what has happened here. And I'm not ready to do 2026 the way we did 2025. So I'm trying to speak to Valve here directly in saying what we kind of need here, ideally, in a review scenario. I almost exclusively care here about the performance of those games, and every game I imagined all the way here from Dome Keeper and FTL, the flat games, all the way to Fantastic Contraption and Skyrim. I want to know what happens when I click all of those things in standalone mode, and I want to see how it changes over time. I'm ready for that journey of 4 years of seeing how it progresses. But David over here, you're going to have the task of hardware reviewing this thing and preparing a review that assesses not just the status that I'm describing at launch date, but also how the hardware relates to that. And so, like, my task is I'm caring about a 5-year journey here for Steam Frame over the next 5 years and how the software, like, I want to email devs and say, hey, I actually played your game on Steam Frame. It worked really well. Is there, and I had these complaints, like, That's how I do VR today. It's how I interact with MetaQuest developers. That's how I would expect to interact over the 5 years of Steam Frame. But at some very specific time next year, you've got to spend a good 2 weeks of your life living inside Steam Frame and assessing whether the hardware matches the promise and whether it's worth people spending whatever the dollar amount is there. There's such different needs that each of us have, and I needed to say that to Valve directly before. Also, I also want to talk about a different concept, but you look like you wanted to respond to that.
No, I think you're right, and I think that the big issue with that is it's not just the hardware with Steam Frame. It is so much about the software in a way that many of these other headsets it isn't. And the big issue is that there are two fundamentally different types of buyers in a way that there aren't really for these other headsets. There are the people who want to use this as a Quest. They want to use it as a standalone headset without a gaming PC. We've already have a commenter here asking, can I do this? Should I do this? And then you're going to have people who want to use it with their gaming PC. And in many ways, this is a dual mode product in a way that we haven't seen. Sure, Quest theoretically is, but fundamentally it's not really designed for that. So I think, yeah, this is going to be one of the hardest products ever to assess and review. As you say, it's going to be an evolving journey. We've seen amazing updates to the Steam Deck software over time. Recently it got like screen off downloads, for example, which sounds pretty fundamental, but it's one of those things that obviously is massively improved. And I expect you're absolutely right to say that we will see massive updates from Steam Frame. We haven't really seen another company other than Meta roll out rapid updates. We're just about to talk about Google, and maybe they're the exception, but we have to see how that happens over the long term rather than just the months after. But there could be a situation here where we have monthly updates from Meta to Horizon OS, Google to Android XR, and Steam to from Valve to Steam Frames OS, and that could be interesting to see how they kind of evolve together.
We'll have to see there. I think that's a tall order for Google, most of all, right? They're the headset releases for whatever headsets run Android XR seem to be spread out enough that there could be hardware differences that make it really hard for the older platform to get, like, that's been the Android story, right? Is Samsung will sometimes hold an update for a year, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, unless there's anything you want to talk about again on the Steam Frame discussion.
I do. Yes.
Our next topic
and I know,
is Android,
we need to move on to Google, but I wanted to talk to those new readers, those new viewers, and say one specific thing on top of David's technical explanation of performance. I explained it on a previous show before the Steam Frame was ever announced. I got to explain it again here. Imagine your Steam Deck in your hands running a game right now. Imagine your Steam machine over there running a virtual world right now. Let's say it's Skyrim VR is running on that Steam machine. It has no display, right? Your Steam Deck right here, you don't care about the display, but it's running it right now. Now you're in your headset. Forget both of those things, right? You've got your controllers in your hand, maybe. But let's forget those controllers. Let's imagine you've got your Steam Deck in your hand. You're not looking at it. Forget what's on it. You're not looking at it. You're now looking up, and you could have any number of windows floating around you, playing all of your flat Steam Frame content or movies or photos, right? Like you could be watching a locally downloaded 720p, 1080p movie on the card inside the headset, maybe floating right there in front of you on Steam Frame. Those other devices that we have discussed, that David is talking about being different wattages, they don't matter. You're watching a movie on this big screen because the headset is creating reality for you, right? Now start thinking about layering in the deck and start thinking about layering in the Steam machine over there. And the specific instance I want you to think about is let's go with Half-Life Alyx. Okay, forget that it's Skyrim over there, and it's Half-Life Alyx running over there on the Steam machine. You're sitting there on the couch. You're playing a Steam game up here. You get up from the couch. You walk into the next room, and the entryway to the next room is a trigger to tell your Steam Frame, switch reality from local reality run from the Steam Frame to the reality run by that Steam machine right there. And so as you're walking across the entrance between two rooms, you transfer instantaneously from the reality that your headset is building for you to Half-Life Alyx. It will feel like walking between a portal between two worlds if done right. We haven't experienced this, but I had to point out, like, the Steam machine over there can make your world for you. And if you do all the software right, it can feel like just walking into it instantaneously. And why does it, like, you're right to point out these wattages, but if you have the whole magic trio here, maybe it doesn't matter. Like, maybe all these prices don't matter. I don't know.
Yeah, look, if you have a gaming PC, such as a Steam machine, then the performance limitations of Steam Frame don't matter anymore. You are able to do the wireless streaming via this dongle that Valve has created, where they have this amazing system of the headset having dual radios. It creates a dedicated hotspot just for the VR streaming. If you have a gaming PC, none of the concerns I've just brought up matter. Of course they don't, because you use the gaming PC. You want to play Half-Life Alyx, you're in your home, you leverage that thing that you've paid money for. We don't know what the Steam machine will cost, or if it's your own gaming PC, it might have cost you thousands of dollars. Of course, you're not going to just leave it sitting there. You're going to use it. The only thing I was bringing up is the fact that most people don't own a gaming PC, and we always forget that in our PC gaming world, that most people don't own one. As far as how you kind of transition, it'll be interesting to see when you open your Steam library on Steam Frame. I imagine you'll probably just get two options. Do you want to run locally, or do you want to stream? And you hit stream and you go in.
I'm sorry that I've lost all our viewers here. I've got a better example. You're waiting for your Half-Life Alyx level to load. The map is right in front of you. You can play a game of solitaire while the game is loading with Steam Frame and with the streaming working this way. No, if you did that today with everything right now, you would tax your PC more while Alyx is loading. This scenario doesn't do that. You're playing a quick game of Angry Birds while your level loads, and then you're throwing Angry Birds away and you're getting into your game. Your time spent previous to this was watching loading bars, and that's all I'm trying to say.
I think that is a good point, that when you are doing this kind of standalone streaming, be it on a Steam Frame or a Quest, you do have this kind of decoupled compute. So a good example of this is, say you're playing quite a slow-paced game, like maybe you're playing Elite Dangerous, and there are different ways to play that. Say you're doing Flight Simulator and you're going across the Atlantic. You can have Netflix open on a local window, right? Be it a Quest browser or a Steam browser, whatever the hell they call it. Or you could have Stardew Valley, right? You could be currently flying across the Atlantic in an Airbus in Flight Simulator 2024, running on your Steam machine or your Windows PC, and then simultaneously locally on the Steam Frame, you have Stardew Valley, where your co-pilot would be sitting. So you can actually kind of playing around with that. It could be a different, slower paced game, could be a strategy game. The specifics don't matter here, but I think it's an interesting point that you do have. That's not going to affect the performance of the PC itself. You're right.
Gosh, you nailed something beautifully there. Like, some of these games have real-time travel or something like real-time travel between worlds. And you've been leaning on the developer entirely. This is another element of my thing, right? Of my editorial that I want you guys all to read. Grand Theft Auto and the hours of music that they recorded for the radio is the most brilliant game design choice ever made, right? The only reason it's not one of the best reason to drive from one area of Grand Theft Auto's map to the other is to listen to the radio on the way. And for the last 10 years in VR, we have entirely 100% depended on every single developer to come up with music tracks for you to pass the time while flying from place to place. And next year, we're going to see a whole wave of videos of people watching Netflix, flying from solar system to solar system, playing a little solitaire right here, and just then getting into the space battle when they arrive.
Sure. The only pushback there is that on Quest, you can do this today, right now, with Netflix and Spotify. I could have Spotify running right now. I could be listening to music, but it would be a bizarre thing to do, but I could. But I think what you're right to say is with Steam Frame, that becomes possible with games, right? You can play these 2D games on Steam. You could have a strategy game. It could be a card game, as you say, Solitaire. There's other kind of card games. I think Valve even has a card game at the moment. And you could have that running while you're inside a VR game. There are big they're very interesting use cases. I see a commenter here saying that they do this today in Elite Dangerous. They do have the windows open inside it, and I've done that too. I've done it in Flight Simulator, where I have an interesting YouTube video open through Horizon OS multitasking that then is not affecting my PC's performance.
George, speaking for the power users out there, saying that they've always done this way, including on the Quest. More power to you, but you're not the average user, right? Like, the average user is in one experience at a time. They don't know how to put things on in the background on their experiences. And I do appreciate everyone pointing out Windows has had this for a long time. But think about what that means. Like, we're going to have to go back to my another article. We need to move on to the next one. I can't wait for you to read my editorial, and we'll talk about this more next week, assuming we recover from the Christmas ailments and the exhaustion. This is a good time to just call out and say, please become a member and a patron to support our work directly. You get an ad-free experience over on UploadVR.com. If you go become a paying member. So if you're reading us a lot, you can make those ads go away, get a cleaner reading experience, and we really want to invest in that going forward. We want to bring you better games, better coverage of games, better longer stories, deeper analysis, and the support that we get from our patrons and members helps us do that. We ready to talk about the next thing, David?
Yeah, let's talk about Android XR and Google. So Google had an Android Show XR specific edition this week. It is arguably the biggest kind of news this week, and we have now the first major software update for Android XR, which is only today available on Galaxy XR, but this is the same operating system that will run on the compute puck of Xreal Aura, which we will also talk about. So let's firstly just talk about this software update. It brings three things. The first is likeness, which is Google's equivalent of personas, Apple's personas in Vision OS. Likeness will be provided to any Android app that tries to request the selfie camera. It thinks it's running on a phone. It's trying to get the selfie camera. This could be, Zoom. It could be Google Meet. It could be anything that's doing a video call or trying to do any kind of, filters. This will bring up a virtual version of you. The difference between Vision Pro and Galaxy XR is that for Galaxy XR, you use a phone app to capture your face. You just pan a phone app around your face, and then it transfers that data onto the Galaxy XR where it is securely stored. The quality here is clearly much lower than the personas today, but remember that the personas today have seen a lot of evolution since Vision Pro launched almost 2 years ago now. And so we expect to see Google improve their likeness quality. To be clear, this is not a spatial likeness. Just like on Vision Pro when it first launched, it was a non-spatial persona. It just existed, as a virtual webcam feed in a 2D window. That's what this is too. This is not an avatar that is, in 3D space that you are able to kind of have in, say the studio or something. This is just, you open Zoom on the Play Store, you start a meeting, and where your webcam would be, you see this. And it's face tracked, to be clear. Galaxy XR does have face tracking. I remember we reported this on day one when Galaxy XR was announced, because we had asked about it and we had seen it demoed. And a lot of people were saying, the Galaxy XR is now face tracking. Where did you see this? What's your source? And we're saying, we are the source. We asked Google and they said yes, and we watched it. So it's a little known fact that Galaxy XR has face tracking. This is the first real interesting use case, I think, for it. So that's the first big thing in this update. There's two other things. The other is PC Connect, which is essentially just a built-in remote desktop. There's nothing too fancy about it. It doesn't support custom aspect ratios. It doesn't support multiple extra monitors. It is just a very simple, have a remote desktop of your PC. It is what we expect it to evolve over time. You can also go and get Guy Godin's virtual desktop on the Google Play Store for $30, I think it is now, or maybe 25, something around there, and then get the advanced features I just talked about, like aspect ratios and things like that, extra monitors. This is very simple. The other feature is travel mode, which is standard on all of these headsets now. You're on a plane, you're on a train, Maybe you're in the back of a car, and if you don't have travel mode, you're going to see the windows drift off in the opposite direction of the vehicle's movement. Travel mode launched with Vision Pro. Apple was the first to bring it. Meta brought it a few months later to Quest headsets. It's a standard XR operating system feature now. Surprised Galaxy XR didn't launch with it, but it is here now. So those are the three features that have arrived in this update that is out now on Galaxy XR.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you compare this. I very much desperately want to see your 2D likeness and your 2D persona done side by side. The M5 specifically, I don't think we need to compare the M2 since they're not, it's an old device, not a new device. But I so desperately would love to see that side by side. Because I've seen the others out there that are like reporting and doing their first test examples of this, but I don't think they all have the back history that you have of testing every one of these since launch. So you've got probably almost globally a perspective to offer there of comparison that almost no one else can match when it comes to like how these likenesses stack up between headsets. So I can't wait to see that from you as soon as we can get to it. Yeah, people are saying they've seen people trying to cut up the strap and they're not interested at all until the strap changes, which it can't because it's a hard strap. And, like I think it's one thing to imagine removing like a soft strap and replacing it with a hard one. It's something else to like remove a hard strap and maybe you have to modify things that have wires in it. Like I don't see people doing Franken Galaxies as quite as frequently as they did Franken Quests.
Yeah, you would have to be someone that does not mind discarding a lot of money. The resale value would obviously be murdered. There are electronics in the side of here, going to the touchpad on the side and the speakers, and obviously bringing the power from the tethered battery port. So do that at your own risk. There are obviously going to be people who hack everything hardware-wise. Coming back to these likenesses, yes, it is very clear that this is not at the quality of Persona, but we'll have to see whether through 2026 that evolves. I really want to see, do they have a plan to do a spatial version, an actual 3D version, and do they pull off something with co-watching like you see on Vision OS? This is another area where Vision OS is just very clearly ahead of everyone else. Apple is delivering software that is far in the future compared to competitors. But at least this means that you don't have to use those. You're muted, by the way, Ian. At least this means you don't have to use those Samsung Galaxy avatars, which kind of look like this in meetings. I would never want to use a Meta avatar or a Samsung Galaxy avatar in a meeting. Even this, I just want to finish this thought. I really don't think that this is something that is too great. I would never want to, even with personas, show up in a meeting. If you have to, at least this is better than nothing. But I think the advantage of these realistic avatars isn't just to paste them into a webcam stream. It's to have a spatial meeting where you have the same sense of space. We've done this multiple times. I'm sure you've done it with other people as well, where you have a spatial persona. You see the same virtual screens in the same position. You can hand each other 3D models. That's where it matters. Just replicating webcam streams, to me, this is just, it's technically interesting, but it's not practical. It's not something that just use a webcam.
It's interesting the way you talk about this. There's so many things to consider. When I do my FaceTime calls as persona avatars, and if I'm talking to someone on a flat screen, I don't tend to think of the window to that person as being a camera, even though it's a virtual camera that's looking at my face and hands. The operating system doesn't give me any indication whether I have control over whether of the direction someone else sees me. So like there's no conception of like, here, take a look at me up here, up this close or this close, right? The operating system is in charge of showing my hands and my head to the other person only at the specific times that it can show that at that angle. You're right about some of this, but what I think gets lost in translation here is the Apple avatars that I get now. They don't they don't show gestures I don't intend to show very often to other people I'm speaking with. So during our shows here, I had my cat pop into my lap multiple times. It happened in early in this show, and I'm, petting the cat like this right here. Um, that's just one small example of like gestures that I don't intend to show to a camera on the other end. I intend to present certain things to that camera. It's the same thing as Zoom. It's the same thing as the kid running into the room to interrupt the live call with BBC or whatever that thing was. When we have a camera, we control what it sees by controlling what's in front of it, right? In VR, we don't necessarily have control of a camera and what the person sees on the other side of things. And in some instances, tracking too much of your body and sending that over the network could be embarrassing. It's actually nice to know, hey, it's just my hands and it's just my face getting sent over the network. And it's only in this little area that appears right in front of the headset.
Sure, I kind of get what you're saying. I don't really see the distinction between if it's your head and hands being tracked in a little 2D window. I don't see any privacy advantage of that versus a spatial call where you're both here together in space. This is the old personas, to be clear. I'll bring up I guess the new ones here. We have a picture here. To me, I don't see this as being any less private than in a 2D window, especially versus a webcam. Then the advantages are enormous. If I really wish that Apple's store demo could include spatial personas. One of the most magical technologies that exists today as a consumer product you can buy is these spatial personas. Because to be clear, we're talking about these things not being on a 2D window. These are in space, just like Ian and I are now as avatars, except these look like the actual person that you're communicating with. And as I keep pointing out, you can have a 2D window shared. I can bring up Safari and click share, and you will both see it in the same place. You will be able to hand 3D models to each other. That's the enormous advantage. And I'm just going to repeat that I can't wait to see whether Google brings an equivalent to Android XR with a spatial likeness. I want to see this in 2026 from Google.
So, I see a question here. Isn't this what we're doing right now? Yes. And David is a brilliant developer. This is a brilliant space. I could never build anything like this. But we have a bingo game now of how often I mismute myself on this little button that's on my tablet right in front of me. And I've joked, but I kind of want maybe a button on the back of my hand to mute and unmute. And it would be so convenient. What?
You would hit that too. You would go like this and go. I think this is one of those.
Well, so right? the other gesture, like in your defense, is slapping my head twice to pause everything. Right? I don't want to necessarily pause everything to just deny some things. It's a UI issue, right? Like can't you cover an Apple Watch to mute it? Isn't that one of the gestures that they've added? Like there's all these things that are going to come to allow us to it was in Ready Player One, right? I can see you've got some emotion suppression software on right now. That is a setting that needs to be really easily toggleable really quickly, no matter where you are. That's all I'm getting at. It's like there's a lot of ways to make that easier.
It's an interesting privacy control. On the mute thing, I just want to say that this is an issue in flat screen. It is, on Zoom and Google Meet, it is the most common thing in the world. Oh, I've accidentally muted myself. I've unmuted myself. There are movies. It's a common trope in movies, right, where people are on a video call.
I'm not a cat.
The one I would like. I haven't had time to even work on this app for months and months. One of the best solutions that I enjoyed in prototyping was just turning the whole world black and white when you're muted. But then if you spend extended time to muted, that's not exactly very fun. I just want to point out to folks, no offense to Ian, but there is a giant floating your muted indicator that pops up. You see it right there, so you can't see it, but he can see it.
The process is unmute stay real fast. You love bringing up the little red icon. Yeah, it's right there. I'm looking at you over here. Yeah, it's right here. It could be a gorilla standing right there, and I wouldn't see it because I'm looking at you over here.
Also, for what it's worth, the tablet has like an orange border that appears. It's very clear when you're muted. It's obviously when in the flow of a conversation, it's possible. But I think fundamentally, at some point, it gets ridiculous. You could have, you are muted signs floating all over the place. But look, we can discuss it.
You can make me glow different. We've got the glow from something. Yeah, you can do it. It's going to happen. Like I heard. All right, let's move on to the next subject. We've got some cool. All right, now as soon as I finish this broadcast, I'm going to go back into my inbox and I'm going to accept a freelance pitch on a subject that's going to be directly related to this conversation in VR chat.
Okay, so our next topic from the Android XR front is Xreal's Project Aura. So this was announced at Google I/O with just a very simple concept render all the way back in May. Now we've seen the first real images and real clips of this device in use. So this is going to be the second Android XR headset, and it is very different from Samsung Galaxy XR. So just like just before we go on, I see Guy Godin saying, "Welcome to UX design. Even when you make things obvious, people still miss it." So Guy Godin feeling my pain of how, no matter how many times you tell the user something, there will obviously be.
It's the easiest way to get a dev to defend you is just, complain to a dev about UI, and they're like, "Yeah, I get it, man. Yeah, how stupid can a user be? Pretty damn stupid." Yeah.
Look, I mean, I did it a few weeks ago. It happens. On to Xreal Project Aura. What is this? Fundamentally, it is this prism optical design where it is see-through. It's not a pass-through device. You're optically seeing through it. Oh, your tracking is going all over the place there. You're optically seeing through it, and then you have the display of a micro OLED panel kind of superimposed onto your view. Historically, there are a couple of issues with this form factor, and one of them is that the field of view has always been very limited. So in current Xreal devices, it's somewhere around 50 degrees diagonal. With Project Aura here, they have been able to increase that to 70 degrees diagonal. And that compares, diagonal makes things sound a little bit better, as we always point out on this show, compared to the horizontal values. So you are still talking about, just over 50 degrees horizontal, but it sounds better when you say diagonal. Compared to VR headset might be, 110, 120 diagonal. Still, though, it's getting there. And the advantage is that you're doing this in a much, much smaller form factor. The difference compared to most Xreal devices, to all Xreal devices of the past, is that instead of just being glasses that you get, that you then plug into your existing device, like a phone or a Steam Deck or whatever, to bring up a virtual monitor, this product comes with a compute puck. And this compute puck, they've confirmed this week, is running the XR2 Plus Gen 2. So it's the exact same chipset as Samsung Galaxy XR, just instead of being in the headset, it's in this little compute puck that in all of their videos so far is shown as being placed on the table, and you can actually see a cooling vent here for air to be kind of pushed out and brought in. I wonder whether this is going to work well in a pocket or whether that will overheat. This is something we've been talking about for a while. One of the things that I think they're doing to encourage you to keep it out is that this also acts as a trackpad. So in addition to this, one of the biggest differences between, the basic display glasses you may be used to if you had Xreal products in the past, is that this does have two tracking cameras, and they're used for both headset tracking, 6DoF, and for hand tracking. So fundamentally, you're going to get the same Android XR experience from Galaxy XR, except with a narrower field of view, with the fundamental trade-off of this style of optical prism device, which is they give you dynamic dimming. So you can dynamically change how much this dims the world in front of you. And the more you dim the real world, so the more this becomes like sunglasses, the more opaque the virtual objects and interfaces will get. And the more you brighten the real world, the more transparent the virtual objects will get. So in fairness to Google and Xreal, they were actually quite honest about this in their clips. You were seeing through the windows, whereas you put on a Galaxy XR, your YouTube window will be opaque. The YouTube video will be opaque. You put on Xreal glasses and you have them on their most transparent setting. There are typically, 3 different dimming settings you can choose. You will see the world behind you very, very clearly on the brightest setting. And then the dimmer you go, the more opaque it will be. But then you're actually losing the advantages of optical see-through because everything gets so much dimmer, which is really, really fascinating, because This is a very different type of optical see-through than, waveguides, where waveguides are obviously still very translucent too, but you actually are still able to get relatively more opacity compared to, at the same level. So this is fascinating because you're now going to have two completely different display technologies running the same operating system, one in a compute puck, one in the headset. And I think this is going to be fascinating to kind of look at the future and say, where is the path that most people want to take? Relating this back to Meta's next headset is trying to do a somewhat similar form factor, but with pass-through cameras and, micro OLED displays and pancake lenses. And I think probably that's going to give you the best of both worlds. There are some very harsh trade-offs here, but you have to realize the advantages. Yes, you get translucency. Yes, you do get a narrow field of view. So that means that as you look around, you're going to see the edges of the virtual screen only appear when you're looking kind of somewhat at it. But the advantage here is that look at the form factor. This thing is going to feel a lot lighter on your head, a lot more comfortable. The one thing I do want to note, though, is for anyone not familiar, this is my VR download bingo card of how often I bring this up. These do not look like sunglasses or glasses. They are very cleverly designed to look like that at first glance, but they're actually set a lot further in front of your eyes. So I'm going to bring up the picture I took when I reviewed the Meta Ray-Ban display glasses. Here is the regular Ray-Ban Meta. Here is the Meta Ray-Ban display, which uses waveguides. And then here is the Xreal 1 Pro, which uses the same kind of flat prism that is going to be used in Aura. Aura is just a wider field of view version. So in real life, it looks worse. I want to point out it actually, the 2D nature of images mean that your brain kind of pattern matches to sunglasses. These do not look anything like sunglasses. That said, that doesn't mean that this is a useless form factor. It is a very, very interesting middle ground between, very low feature smart glasses and full feature but very heavy VR headsets. I think this may be a dark horse product for 2026. This is going to run all the same content as Galaxy XR, but at a fraction of the weight. Cost-wise, we're expecting this to be on the order of $1,000. That is a very, very rough expectation. Don't take that as a specific price, but we're talking about in that kind of area. And to be clear, it will come with a compute puck. This is one product.
There was some people got me really distracted out there in the comments. We have LCD technology will go fully opaque on command. Why is nobody joining that to AR? You could have sunglasses that blot out the sun itself. It would sell like bonkers. You just that comment right there sent me on a spiral, imagining how delightful it would be to do a solar eclipse with a VR headset and actually feel the sun changing its heat on your arms, and to know that the eclipse is starting based on that alone while protecting your eyes.
So I see this brought up sometimes. People say, why don't we use transparent LCD? Or mostly people ask about OLED. There are display technologies that can do this, because you need a lens is the answer. You can't focus on an LCD that's put right in front of your eye. You can't focus on any display like that. The human eye can't focus below 20 centimeters or so, depending on the person. Go and put your head right up to your monitor, and that's the answer. So you need a lens. That's in VR display systems, you need a display, a light engine, a pixel source, whatever you want to call it, and then you need a lens to not just to magnify in front of your field of view. That's the main reason, right? To magnify the image, but also so that you can even focus on it at all. So in the case of a VR headset, you have the display behind a pancake lens, quite simple. Fundamentally, maybe you have a Fresnel lens on other headsets. Fundamentally, to greatly oversimplify, you're magnifying something in front of you. And then in the process, you're extending the optical length out further, the focal length out to meters or infinity, whatever. With these kind of bird bath or prism flat prism as they now are, they don't want to be called bird bath because they're slightly slimmer now. You just kind of, it's just a simple optical combiner, right? You're combining the micro OLED display, which is up here, into your field of view. It doesn't matter if the display is fully opaque, right? It's a micro OLED display. These are a tiny 1080p micro OLED displays. That doesn't, that doesn't matter. They're already opaque. That's not the problem. The problem is that you have to then combine them into this prism, and that's the part where you lose the opacity. You have to then either dim it down or bring it up. So that's the irony here, that when you compare the pass-through systems of something like Vision Pro, Galaxy XR, and Quest 3 to these Xreal systems, the irony is that even though this is the one that you're actually seeing the real world directly in, you're actually getting a brighter image from the pass-through cameras. You can never get both at the same time with this. You can't get a bright image of the real world and really opaque imagery of virtual objects. Whereas on pass-through cameras, sure, it's going to be lower resolution and blurry, and grainy in low light. These are engineering problems that can be solved over time, but fundamentally, this is an issue. There's no magical solution to this. You can't solve it. Fundamentally, this means you have to trade off real world brightness and virtual opacity. Pass-through cameras give you both at once.
So I saw Spare Eyebrows making a joke out there. Can I get a pair with a fake mustache to make myself a little bit? I mean, that's the end of the quote, but I like the image there in my head of how it makes it look a little bit spooky, like a spy. I wanted to talk about field of view and how it relates to presence. I think it's research suggests around 90, somewhere in that range, is when you start to feel present in the space that a virtual world is presenting for you, or that a headset is presenting for you. That is magic to me. It's a very special kind of magic. It's what transports you to whatever place is delivered to you. All of these devices that we've seen, the Meta one, the unshippable $10,000 plus glasses, they were in the range of 70 degrees field of view. That's what the pitch is here on this field of view as well, right? Well below the presence-inducing number.
Yeah, correct. This has the same field of view as Orion, 70 degrees diagonal.
Yeah, so we are talking about so completely different things. We are talking about augmented reality when we're talking about that sub 90 degree field of view, and we're talking about what content can you put in there and what's good inside of that content. So that makes me think of Guy up there, or Guy Godin, who said that they use these glasses, and they were describing it as well as you, David, saying it's like it's 95% dark when it wants to. That's a couple windows in front of you, but that's not presence. And so, like, presence is a great thing to give as a canvas on which to put a whole bunch of other stuff. But it's such a different thing than this, and I wanted to at least introduce that context to this conversation.
Yeah, this is a decent illustrative image. I'm gonna, credit Google and Xreal for being kind of very honest about this. Mostly. So you see here the two issues. So you see that you're looking forward, and look, you can see the field of view cut off. So whereas on Galaxy XR, you'd be seeing these side screens all the way out to here, and all the way out on the other side. With Xreal, you're going to see this field of view cut off, and as you notice, you can see through these kind of virtual interfaces. In reality, it's going to be slightly worse than this. As Guy Godin points out, yes, when you want to actually see these things opaque, which of course you do, if you watch a YouTube video, you don't want it to be translucent. It just looks odd in a way. The other thing is, like, when it's so translucent, you lose the color black completely. So any black will just become fully transparent. These are additive technologies. That's kind of the fundamental issue here.
It's
so
wrong to me. It doesn't seem like the right idea. You just described the core function is I want to watch a movie. And like one tool that every cinematographer, director has ever used is the color black.
Yes. So you can get it, but then you also then can't see anything else. So it's the weird irony here that it's kind of like having a VR headset without pass-through, even though this is the optically see-through system. It's a really bizarre irony of these display glasses that is not talked about enough. But what you do get, the advantage is form factor. We have to keep bringing up the advantage, and it is the fact that these things are, very light. You're talking like just over 100 grams, and comfortable. What I do, if I'm on a 1-hour flight, I bring the Xreal glasses, and if I'm on anything over 2 hours, I bring the Vision Pro. And the Vision Pro is an undescribably better visual experience, truly beyond. But if I'm on a 1 hour flight, which in the UK is quite common, this is a small country, then I will, you know, not bother to take the Vision Pro out because of the friction there. So
Yeah.
this device does have an opportunity because right now, with one of the big trade-offs with the Xreal glasses is because you're mirroring your phone. And again, no one really talks about this. Your phone screen has to be on the whole time. So I want to, put a Netflix video on. I have to kind of set my phone there and connect it to the glasses, and the phone screen's on the whole time. I also, I don't have the ability to control it without the phone. It's just a dumb mirror. This is a fascinating product. It's got the hand tracking, 6DoF. It's all running on here. I can download my Netflix videos and then go on a flight. I think this is going to be a good product, but it's not going to be the same experience as a headset. The issue is headsets are too heavy. This is why I think the kind of approach that we saw when we talked about last week, Gravity XR from China and Meta's future headset is the perfect middle ground where you are doing proper pass through. You're doing the VR style display system, but in a glasses form factor. I think that's probably going to be the winning solution here. In the meantime, though, this is a very interesting way to use low cost existing technology to kind of pull off something like this. And I think they can coexist. I think you could have both. And I think this is the form factor advantages here are significant. There is a world in which people own multiple devices here instead of trying to have everything all in one.
Yeah, I'm wondering how much the Steam frame alleviates the same problem that you described of the friction that the Apple Vision Pro currently encounters. That is a significantly lighter device that can fit into much smaller pockets. And I wonder, would you take that out for a quick hour flight?
No, I think to me the Steam frame is the same friction as Apple Vision Pro, right? They're roughly the same size. This thing, or at least the current one, can fit in my jacket pocket, whereas Steam frame and Apple Vision Pro are both going to go either in a backpack or in their own bag.
I'm going to wear a shoulder bag. I'm going to wear it's probably going to go in a nice little koala pouch right here, not a koala, a kangaroo pouch. It'll be a nice little pouch right here, and I'll pull it out, put it on, and it'll go right back in the pouch. That's what my Vision Pro is today, and
Sure.
and I've got the smallest case imaginable for that. That's what the Vision Pro is today, and I've got the smallest case imaginable for that. I'm going to get a much smaller case for the Steam frame, and sometimes it'll probably just hang on my neck.
Yeah, look, for sure. That's if you want to do that. I don't think I would do that, but that's going to be between people. I see people in the comments bring up the fact that, again, we're really trying to underscore this Compute Puck is running Android XR and not the Gemini glasses Android XR. This is not like the Meta Ray-Ban display thing. This is the actual Android XR. It's the same OS that's running on Galaxy XR. So as people are pointing out, you can run Demio on this thing. You can put these lightweight glasses on and have Demio there. And then the opacity doesn't matter that much. It's okay that the Demio figures are kind of holograms. That's okay. And I see people saying Norm from Tested said it was great to play Demio in these glasses. So I think this is going to be a dark horse product. I think at 70 degrees, this is the minimum bar. I was able to try a 70-degree prototype of a competitor, Vitcheer's glasses, and I thought this is, to me, the minimum bar. I think that the current field of view of 50 diagonal is not good enough. But 70 is the minimum bar. I think this is finally where these kind of prism display glasses get good.
I guess I'll throw this out there, David. We talked previously about the different ways that you can get your phone into VR, saying there's like 3 different ways, and you want pass through good enough to just look direct at the phone. And I really that really stuck with me because what I want is my phone at 1-to-1 exactly where it is, positionally tracked exactly right, with a digital representation of the screen overlaid on top of it, so that I get better than pass-through quality almost. That like digitally you could improve the quality beyond what's visually there. You could have a block in your hand, right? You
Sure.
could have a phone that the screen is off and it's only showing that screen virtually to you at that super high resolution. The moment you have that, an tracked object with you everywhere, some of these things go away. Some of our complaints, some of our, it's a lot of friction here that I'm describing.
Yeah, I just think the problem with that is that then there has to be a software implementation there. So maybe if you're on an Apple Vision Pro and you own an iPhone, this all gets done for you. What if I'm trying to use an iPhone with a Galaxy XR, or a Pixel phone with a uh, Vision Pro? And that's the issue here. There has to be software set up for this, and even when it does exist, I have to then set that up, right? It has to be something I go and pair. At the end of the day, you get it by default with the good pass-through, and it means that any device can pull in, right? Maybe I pull my tablet over, maybe I want to bring my laptop, maybe I just got the phone yesterday and I just want to use it instantly. I think at some point, once you get good enough pass-through, you don't have to think about these things. And look, with open periphery designs like this, you just look down, right? You just look down at your phone. So
I think
in this case,
right. I mean, you nailed it. It's just that's why I'm sort of pressing on the other optical technology potentially having a better solution over the long term for that, right?
sure.
And you're absolutely right about that. This is being the biggest opportunity for Apple to pull the trigger on in the near future was to do this. How can anyone match? Uh, but there's so many things that I could take this down so many roads. Imagine an iPhone that has all the functions of an iPhone, with the exception of its camera and with the exception of its apps. So it has all of the Apple apps, the built-in services that come with it, but none of the third-party apps, or no thing. Why couldn't Apple tomorrow ship that as a $9.99 service that you could pay for per month, and you just overlay your Android phone with that? You lose all apps, but you get everything else Apple. You get Apple protection that they're supposedly charging for you. I'm not saying I want this. I think it's a bad idea. I'm just saying, hypothetically, iPhone is software all the way down if you really wanted it to, and you can lay that software on any surface you really want, and it could be in VR.
I
Android did this already.
I think they want you to buy an iPhone, and I think the hardware software pairing is what makes the iPhone. They would say, oh, we don't have the secure enclave, we can't guarantee privacy, security. I think it's an interesting idea to eventually get all of this virtualized, but I think that's a long way off. What I want is a virtual Mac on my Vision Pro. I want to be able to run a virtual Mac virtual display. That's what my biggest Vision Pro feature request, more than anything else. I think that's far more viable than a virtual iPhone at this point.
Are you describing a virtual desktop?
I'm describing, yes, that it's a virtual Mac virtual display, that it's running I would say more a virtual machine, a VM of Mac OS running inside Vision OS.
So the Steam desktop.
Exactly. You get SteamFrame does give you this by default. SteamFrame gives you this, of course. SteamFrame gives you a Linux desktop. SteamFrame gives you this 100%. I'm saying I want this, but I want Mac OS. I want Mac OS running on the Apple Vision Pro.
I mean, you're speaking straight to my heart, right? Like I'm the desktop is where I organize my files, right? It's where the beginning of me like going, what am I doing with the computer? I'm moving this to here, putting this in this, and and we have no conception of that in VR. We have no desktop. And there's so many steps further than that, David, right? Imagine taking something off that desktop and into your space, right? Like that's the obvious next step.
I mean, it's the desktop and it's the desktop apps. It's the ability to have a real file system. We've said this before. It's one of the most promising parts of SteamFrame. Ironically, SteamFrame is the one headset that does have a real desktop OS and a real file system, and it's the only one that isn't really designed for spatial computing. Where you asked Valve about this, and they said, "No, that we're just playing games. We like to play games. This is for playing games. But if you want to do that, of course you can go do that. But that's not what we built this headset for."
Inevitably, right? I'm just playing games goes to, where is that folder to mod this thing?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Huge advantages. Okay, let's talk about our last subject. This one is fascinating. So we just talked about the 3 features that have just arrived on Android XR, right? Likeness, travel mode, and PC Connect. We've talked about what's going to be the second Android XR headset, which is Xreal's Project Aura, bringing this kind of birdbath flat prism optical design and adding hand tracking and head tracking and a compute puck. Let's talk about what Google says is their flagship upcoming software feature for Android XR. So it should, in theory, run on both Galaxy XR and Xreal Project Aura next year. What's the big software feature that Google wanted to let the world know is coming? It is system auto spatialization, the ability to turn any content into 3D, any 2D window that you have open in Galaxy XR into 3D. So Google's quote here, and I want to bring it up because it makes clear what the scope is here. Just imagine if every game was immersive, every YouTube video was immersive, if the entire web was immersive. And the demo they showed here was they had City Skyline, I believe it was the city builder game running on a PC, right, being streamed to this 2D window in Galaxy XR, and then they turned on this feature, auto spatialization, and the AI system was able to tell the difference between the UI that's fixed on the game and the background. And so then make it 2D or make it 3D such that it looks like you're looking into a window with the UI as a kind of extended border, the UI of this game, which Google has no knowledge of, but the AI is just figuring it out on the fly, and then make the background like you're looking into a 3D world. So this is interesting because not in terms of AI implementation, but in terms of like fundamentally what you get as an output. This is what a lot of people wanted from Steam Frame. And a lot of the speculation was, well, if there's this big focus on flat screen gaming, maybe there's going to be this really easy to use Steam API for developers to make their games 3D, or maybe they're going to do an injection. There's no such thing that we're aware of that is not announced with Steam Frame. But we do have Google doing this for everything, every game. Theoretically, now I want to be clear here about we're talking about what they're promising. We are going to heavily scrutinize this. Theoretically, this is any game. Theoretically, this is you have to have a PC for this to be for PC games, of course. But you run Cyberpunk on your PC, you stream it to your Galaxy XR on a giant screen with your gamepad paired, and it's 3D. You're playing Cyberpunk in 3D. That is a massive claim. The way Google has talked about this is either vast overpromising or a revolutionary feature that's going to set Android XR apart from Horizon OS and Vision OS.
Yeah, this could be, it's one of the things that Google, if they really wanted to get into it with us, I would love, if Google's watching, right? Email us and we'd love to do this story, right? Google has a bunch of long brewing research projects that they've invested in a lot of research at very fundamental levels, looking at these ideas. They had their own version of these things a long time ago. There's so many examples of, I don't know, headset replacement. They had a version of headset replacement where they could swap out the headset for your actual face. And that was like last decade that I think Google had that tech. So they've got these long brewing things that they've just been chipping away at, that if they just put them in the right places inside Android XR, it could be the dream that everyone really wants it to be. But you also need a hardware story that makes sense to kind of like express that. And I don't think we really have that out of Galaxy XR yet.
Yeah, look, Google, and specifically Google DeepMind, is the leading AI lab on the planet. I don't think anyone could argue that in terms of totality. Google is at the forefront of AI. Some of the things they're putting out in research and in terms of shipping are ahead of everyone in the industry, and this is able to trickle down into their products. I say this, I'm trying to, put out there what my position is here. I do own a Pixel phone. I also use a Windows PC and an Apple iPad and an Apple MacBook. I try to keep in all the ecosystems, but I definitely notice that the AI features in Google's Pixel version of Android are beyond anything else. Obviously, I don't think anyone is going to disagree that, for example, Gemini is very far ahead of Siri and even far beyond Meta AI. So this is, from that position, I'm not going to be skeptical to the point of, this is nonsense. Google is obviously lying here. But on the other hand, this is a massive, massive claim. I think it's interesting to see, if we talk about all of these stories in totality, there was this expectation or worry from people that maybe Android XR is something Google is going to kind of push out and then forget about and not update. So far, it's a very short amount of time since launch, but so far that doesn't seem to be the case. It looks like they're serious about this. It looks like they are actually trying to bring, a very meaningful software updates. And I'm excited to see what they bring in 2026. This is going to be a story we follow closely. Does Google release software updates at the same pace of Meta, or does it just throw this in the bin 6 months from now?
So a couple things here. Number one, I love how many questions that I see in our comments. It means that you're responding the way I kind of hope that you do, to the way I try to structure these conversations. We're dealing with the future. We don't know how it's going to play out. There's some really interesting ideas. There's going to be some dead ends, as you know, to echo what Andrew Bosworth was saying over on um his thing. I'm gonna be really outlandish here and talk about one of the research projects again. I've brought it up multiple times. This is Google's research project, right? The one with the robot um, delivers things to you in VR. It if you roll back the tape of time, is it 15 years now or 20 years? I can't. It's a little blurry. It would be unheard of and insane to imagine getting into a car with a perfect stranger and having them take you to another destination. It wasn't socially a thing that anyone did. And over the course of 20 years, we had to be like, it's okay. It's okay. This person's vetted. They've got 4,000 rides right there. They're rated 4.9. I'm not going to get murdered in a field taking this random ride from an unvetted person. Um, Imagine uh, that Google research project. And the Google research project, to recap for you, was a robot that what you did in VR is you said, I want a can of Coke. You grab the can of Coke virtually and put it on the table right there. Can of Coke is right there. And then it slowly fills in as a UI item here, this 3D object. And when it hits 100%, the can of Coke has been delivered to you by a robot. You pick it up and you can drink it. Fascinating concept. Why can't a human come into your house and do the same thing? Why can't we take DoorDash and Uber to the next natural level? VR glasses, they never see my house. They just see a flowery path to the delivery of the can of Coke, right? And so my can of Coke gets delivered by the DoorDasher, the Google Dasher, right to here. And then I grab it and they disappear. They never saw my home. I never saw them. It was transported here.
Yeah, I think this was a Ready Player One plot point, right? With the pizzas that arrive by
Yep.
drone and they would appear.
This isn't an original idea. That's the insanity of this, David.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of interesting research that Google is doing and that Google DeepMind is doing that would be interesting to see trickle down into Galaxy XR. One of the most interesting stories this year, of course, was Genie 3, the world model there that is a long way off being viable for VR frame rates and resolutions, of course. But you can imagine maybe in 2026 with a Genie 4 or a Genie 5, we start to see something that at least for a quick demo can run on something like Galaxy XR. I think it's going to be fascinating to see, do we see, a Quest priced headset that can actually run Android XR? Right now, this is everything we're talking about is gated behind an $1,800 headset. Xreal Project Aura, we expect to be $1,000 and have its kind of trade-offs of its optical system. It does seem like there is this real kind of missing gap for a headset to bring a lot of these features over to people. And I see a lot of the commenters ask, how is Meta going to compete with Android XR over time outside of gaming? Ironically, as I keep saying, there's so much, discourse around, Meta doesn't care about gaming. Ironically, Meta is the company that does care about gaming. There is no Deadpool VR and Batman from Google or Apple. If that's the irony here. If you want to just do VR gaming and you don't own a gaming PC and you're not interested in like a PS5 or whatever, the Quest headset is the best one to go for. Quest 3 is the headset by far, and I would not recommend anything else right now at this exact moment. But when it comes to spatial computing, when it comes to bringing in these existing ecosystem features of Google Play and Chrome and Maps and Photos, and on Apple's side there, Apple equivalents, you see this picture coming together of a spatial computing system that it's hard to imagine how Meta can really be an alternative. It's getting harder and harder.
Gaming is 90 to 95% of usage. Meta is ashamed of that for whatever reason. Interesting take from Guy. I don't think that's the case. It's a jaded take out there from Guy, but I get the sentiment there. I understand it.
Go to meta.com/quest or whatever their URL is, and you will see people. The first thing you will see is people playing games. people have spun this narrative that I don't think is actually quite true. It is the case that Meta wants to expand the use case of Quest headsets from just gaming. And you're right to say that it is majority gaming. I don't think that means that they are ashamed of it, right? If you were as a business targeting one demographic and you wanted to expand it to more people, it doesn't mean you hate your current demographic. It just means you want to expand it to more people, right? I'm trying to think of a better analogy here, but in general, if if you have a hobby and you're really good at one thing and your weakness is in another area and you try to get better at the weakness, it doesn't mean you don't want to do the thing you're good at. It just means that that's not where you grow. If you want to grow the business, if you want to grow VR, it has to go beyond just gaming. And I think that's kind of what is being seen here. But again, go look at the marketing of Quest. It is marketed mostly as a games console because that's what it is. And again, what do you see Meta coming out with? They don't come out with, Meta XL. They come out with Deadpool VR.
So Guy Godin out there saying they killed the store. They tried to push their Horizon Worlds BS on everyone, and a lot of developers quit and went bankrupt. How many developers quit and went bankrupt because Valve made the choices they did on the time scale they did, right? I got to throw that same question back at them. And I think that's such a hard thing. There was one quote that Valve gave us that I don't think has made it into an article yet, but they said something to the effect of, we had this last year. We wanted, not enough of the games were ready, and not enough of the weight was shaved off. And so they waited till now to ship it. And when you think that this has been brewing with them for that long, that they've been chipping away like a hammer at this for that long, and you start thinking about Meta trying to compete with that. Wait, how long have they been working on this headset? They're going to ship one headset every 8 years, and we've been shipping one every year almost. How serious are they about this, right? Yeah, and so Guy is acknowledging that Valve is to blame too, and they didn't really support devs either. And I think David has pointed out, and part of this conversation is Google has made no promise of supporting devs either, and then Apple has made no promise of supporting game devs either. There's no one here that is going to fund. Yeah, I know where you're going to go. Multi-million-dollar projects, except for Meta, right?
Yeah, no.
Meta is the only one funding projects at that scale, and we're all mad that there's not more, right? We get it.
Well, it's more than that. We're not just mad that there's not more. We're somehow then mad at Meta, which is the only company that is doing this. I saw recently, I can't remember the game. I think it was called Project Revenant or something like that. It's one of those really, really interesting upcoming space VR games. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's called Project Revenant. I might be forgetting it. But they put out a Discord post where they were talking about how they had spent years looking for a publisher for their big, high budget, high production value VR game, and they had talks with so many different potential people, and the only one that came through strong and just without conditions and without fluff around the edges was Meta. And they were kind of pointing out that there is this absurd situation where, I keep saying it again, the only company that actually does fund high fidelity, high budget VR games is the one that we all scream at for not caring about VR gaming. And it's to me, I've never understood that. There are so many.
I know what it is.
Sorry, let me just finish. There's so many valid criticisms of Meta. There really are. We could spend 10 hours talking about valid criticisms of Meta, but being the one that doesn't care about VR games, it's so absurd that it's a counter truth. It's just so opposite to the reality. If you go and talk to a VR developer who has had to try and find funding and see what they say about that,
There's many ways for me to take this, many ways for me to think about this. I've spent a lot of hours of my life moving folders around hard drives. And those folders that I'm moving around hard drives contain everything I've created in this world, digitally, at least. And I have no place to put those up in virtual reality. I have no place to invite friends in to see those things. And I don't see why I should scan my home and then put digital frames on the walls for Meta. Like, I don't see why I need to put a copy of my home on their servers. That's what's missing here. Like, I don't, over the length of this, it's just like I've built nothing of value inside of Meta's ecosystem. It all exists on a hard drive that I've kept inside of other ecosystems, or I've just kept to myself, right? Like, and I access that drive inside other ecosystems. And at various times over the last 10 years, companies like Google have made bets on certain things, like your photo library, your photo roll, and they gave you an unlimited plan for like 3 years or something if you bought a Pixel phone. Every single photo that you put into that phone, they would store in full resolution on their servers. So they made a promise when they debuted that whole thing that, like, you can use us the same way you use that hard drive right now. And then after 3 years, they turned off that promise and said, now we've actually figured out how much this is going to cost us. And it's going to be a monthly rate in order to store terabytes. And actually, we're actually going to learn everything about your photos and use it to train our models and all the other things. And all I want to do is go hit download all on Google's servers and put it back in, and put it on a drive, put it with everything else. And now I've got this store of data that I take and mess with everything. But I'm talking about, like, this is what I value. What I value is the stuff I put on this hard drive. And I have no place to put it up for others to look at in virtual reality after 10 years. And you're the social company? Like, you're the social company that should be giving me spaces to show off my photos and my videos to friends and family. And like, they've just failed again and again and again to give me a surface to show these things that I really, because after it all, it has to be on Meta servers. And if it's not on Meta servers, they do not give a shit about you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, that's very much so how these companies operate, right? It's about integrating their own services. I think you're quite kind of, on a modern sense, idiosyncratic in the fact that you want to keep all these things on a hard drive. For most people, they pay the $2 a month to iCloud or Google Drive and just keep it all stored there. Um, on a broader level, you could be able to share photos with people, and I think that's something they probably will do on the immersive home. No arguments there. I think we've really there's so many things we're kind of talking about at once here. Yeah, it's hard to kind of narrow this down into one specific
I
take.
know.
You've kind of gone all over the place there.
Oh yeah, no, I was touching on everything, and our commenters are getting depressed because they're seeing Meta's tender. Like, they're getting depressed on multiple levels here. I'm going to throw out there what I love about VR. I'm not a VR enthusiast. I'm not enthusiastic about VR use. I don't go out and say, like, you should go spend your time in VR. What I find in VR is focus. It lets me forget. It's more focus than I get in a theater where I've paid somebody else money to protect this experience from interruption, right? I get such focus right there, and I get vibes. Now you add vibes to the focus, right? I'm playing some music over there, I'm setting the mood, and nobody can mess with it, right? Whenever I get sad about the ill uses of VR, the people who may not be investing in this with their whole heart or like with good intentions, right? Like, I come back to that, right? Like, there's so many people that will be granted moments of peace and serenity and focus that they could not be given that in any other way, shape, or form. Like, you put a television in front of them and they're still hearing the sounds of everything else around them. You give them a VR headset and you give them an escape from whatever is immediately surrounding them. And we are going to have to balance that, I think, over the span of time with, like, shouldn't we also improve their lives outside the headset? I think that was some of the Carmack stuff. But I wanted to, that's my bit of positivity. That's why I use VR, is the focus and vibes I can get at any moment I want them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of great things about VR. Just to be clear, I did look up in the background the name of that funded game. It was Remnant Protocol. It looks like a really great space game that Meta funded. So people have this idea that Meta is no longer funding games. It's not true. There are multiple games that they're funding, and I keep saying they're the only company doing it. And correct me if I'm wrong. If you're out there and you know anyone who is at another company that's doing this kind of funding, let me know. I think VR for me is the best way to hang out with people remotely. I think multiplayer VR gaming is significantly more rich on a social level than disembodied gaming. Having a headset in your head and playing a game on your TV of Fortnite with a friend is not the same thing as standing next to their avatar and being able to, fist bump and point at the same thing and hear them from their voice being emitted from their mouth in a spatial audio sense. And I think playing something like Dungeons of Eternity with a friend is immeasurably better than being on FaceTime with them or playing Fortnite disembodied. So just to give one positive thing about VR. And then, yes, there's so much potential beyond gaming that I don't think the current hardware delivers on because it's either too low resolution or too uncomfortable. And I think we are about to see in the next few years the hardware actually be able to deliver some of these use cases that people are skeptical about. And we keep saying the skepticism is actually not about the fundamental idea, it's about the hardware and tech not being good enough yet, just like 180-degree videos 10 years ago, for example. I see you're muted, Ian. Ian, you're muted.
Oh, I'm muted again. Darn it. I swear I clicked that before I started talking. Darn it. Yeah, I think we're getting close to the end here. I am loving the discussion, and Guy was sort of qualifying some of their previous statements, saying they fund them, but they don't promote them when they launch. They don't seem to care. Batman being the best example.
What?
That's also like
well, hold on. Let me just. They had a. Did they not have an ad on the Sphere in Vegas? I saw ads all over YouTube. They had that Craig Storm tried the bus that they drove all around the place. They advertised it at the Game Awards. I feel like some of this is just you're trying to come up with negative things to say. Come
no,
on. They didn't promote Arkham Shadow. It was put on the side of every Quest headset. It came with every Quest headset.
I think there is a lesson to be learned at Meta about what games become places people want to come back to. I don't think they know. I don't think they know what places are worth spending time in VR and coming back to. Beat Saber was the best one that they figured out, and they bought it.
Sure.
And that's honestly is anyone it's still a tentpole production, but it's not a place that people need to come back to.
Well, I mean, it depends how you define place. If you put a very harsh definition of place, no, but it is a game that people come back to all the time. And we kind of get, I think in many ways, we're actually disconnected by what people use VR for. And Beat Saber is a huge percentage of VR usage still today. It is still one of the most popular reasons people put on a headset, and people love Beat Saber. But I think it is fascinating to say that, yes, of these three blockbuster games that we've seen from Meta in the past 3 years, Asgard's Wrath 2, Batman Arkham Shadow, and Deadpool VR, they've all been single player linear games in the sense of they're a game you play through and you complete, and that's it. They're neither repeatable games, nor are they live service, nor are they multiplayer, which is interesting again, because you would imagine Meta would be making these live service games. I think one thing that is possible is that the next blockbuster from Meta will be exactly what you say. It will be a multiplayer game designed to get people to come back to it over and over again, maybe even a free-to-play game. I other than Arkham Shadow 2, which we know is in development, I think there's a massive space here for exactly that. Because you're right to say that as amazing for core gamers as a great single-player game that you play for 10 hours is, that isn't something you come back to. And actually, maybe you play Arkham Shadow and then you leave your headset down, whereas a different type of game that you come back to every week would actually probably be better for VR retention.
Okay, so let me try to let me try to close the space between what Guy is saying and what David is saying here, because I think they're both right in their various spheres, and they're wrong. They're talking past each other a little bit. I think the issue here is that Meta has invested in advertising in the real world, but on its own platform, they haven't picked winners. And that's both a good and a bad thing. Like, you can criticize both of those things. Like, they're trying to let it be a space where the good rises to the top at the same time, while promoting Horizon Worlds in front of the stuff that they want to rise to the top. So, like, here's their slop fest that they're pushing first. And then behind that, you've got all the paid games that are getting, like, we want to see the survival of the fittest happening with these paid games. But also, you've got to look at our slop first. And so, like, when I'm hearing Guy complain about promotion, I'm trying to read his picture of this whole, like, I'm thinking he's talking about this whole ecosystem of just, you've pushed the paid stuff in the back, period, including your own investments. Like, you could have done better on your own investments, not to mention all those poor struggling devs out there that are just trying to build something for their family and their future, right? Like, they're not, those devs out there aren't building the next Fortnite. They're building the next year of their salary.
Yeah. So some of this is true. Some of this is outdated. A lot of this, I think, is kind of leveraging on that kind of Quest to Horizon article we did. And we have to remember that that is almost 2 years ago now. Well, I think maybe a year and a half or so. The scenario here has changed. I actually am in a Quest 2 right now. I opened the store, right? I click on the menu, I open the store, and I actually don't see any Horizon World slop at all anymore. I see Thief VR. I see Demio Dungeons and Dragons Battle Mark. I'm just telling you what I see right in front of me. Men in Black, Deadly Delivery. I see what's this, Little Planet. I'm now seeing like a collection of good games for the holidays, highlights of 2026. This is me live on this show, opening up the store and just telling you what I'm seeing. I don't see any Horizon slop right now on the store, and this is something that they have solved. I think not enough people have noticed that over the past 6 months or so, they've actually started to roll some of this back. They haven't. I think some of the feedback and the hatred that they've gotten from the community has clearly been heard. Try it yourself right now. You're in a Quest 3. Open your menu and bring up the store, and I'm curious, what do you see right now?
I mean, I'm sure I'll see the same games.
Well, no, it should be personalized. I'm curious.
Okay, all right. So you want me to do the pause thing? Oh,
what? You don't need to pause. I don't. Okay, you seem to have.
I see the menu. Not
just bring up the menu and hit the store.
Come on. I've got the app loaded. Nightclub Simulator, Tactical Assault, Veil Extraction, Downshot. I'm scrolling down. I've got Body Combat, Fit, Beat Combat. That's an app. So apps.
Do you see any Horizon Worlds?
I've got Horizon Plus in the top right-hand corner. That's top down. I'm scrolling down. I don't see any worlds. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people have not noticed that a lot of this push of the Horizon slop has actually gone away. We have a screenshot from our.
That's Meta is always fixing something, but they're only fixing it to serve themselves. It's always true, right? Like, it's this grating feeling that, oh, you fixed it, but only after it was fucking horrendous.
Agreed. I agree that at the time we published that article, and that's why we did it. That's why we made it such a priority to call out this is terrible. And I don't know how much an effect that had or how much an effect the community had. I think it's clear that it did have an effect, right? I don't think that went unnoticed at Meta. It's quite clear that something has changed since then. But we're now coming into 2026, and I don't see as much Horizon slop anymore. And I did see a lot of it a year and a half ago.
No, I appreciate that. It means they've clearly gotten some messaging there. It also indicates, like, what happens to the worlds? How do they improve them? What's the next steps? And it's been a S show for 2 years. I've cussed too much. Any devs of paid games out there, talk to any dev. Yes, I'm talking to all the devs I can out there. And let's end this show by talking about Automa by Justin Corcoran, Phosphor Games. Justin's one of our patrons out there, has been a regular viewer of our show, and then brought us a trailer that we put in our UploadVR showcase last week. Encourage you to go wishlist that to get more info about it. I'm not going to encourage you to go buy it because we haven't reviewed it, but I think it's a good idea to wishlist it. at this point, because I did go experience the opening area, and you can go see the opening area on our article, right? And then you can go see the trailer. You can see the vibes that they're going for, what they're trying to do in Standalone. We premiered that in the UploadVR Showcase Winter Edition. We that came to them partially. It came to us, and it's coming to you partially because of VR Download, right? Like, and in our own little way, like, they didn't pay. Justin is a patron for our site, but that it didn't weigh on me including him in this show. What I appreciate his support, and all I'm getting at here is we're doing our own little part, as small as we possibly can, to support the devs out there who are struggling against the tidal wave of platform chess that's being played. It's platform chess. Um, this company A is partnering with company B, and because of that, company C is going to be left out in the cold. And company C in a lot of these situations is just a single dev out there struggling to get their app in front of eyeballs, and they're like, "Oh man, I gotta go pay TikTok some dollars now. I gotta go spend some money on TikTok to get some eyeballs, and not the platform on which I've released the game. They're not going to give me the eyeballs." So, like, Automa, go check them out and consider wishlisting their game. And I got to talk about Stellar Cafe. I just spent my morning in Stellar Cafe. I can't recommend you go buy it because I haven't had enough time to go play the whole game. But Stellar Cafe is out today from the developer of Job Simulator at a new company called Astrobeam. And I played the first level of this game with hand tracking and voice. I teleported from place to place in this game with my voice today, right? Like, this is breaking. This is a new capability, a new breakthrough game type. And is it any good? I don't know yet. I would love to have that conversation with with this audience of people who can go into Stellar Cafe by Astrobeam and experience something brand new that they've never experienced before. And you can do it today in virtual reality on those Quest headsets that we're all complaining about, right? You can teleport from. You can tell the bartender. You can say, "Hey, Visor, teleport me over there," and you'll teleport over there. It worked. I tried it all this morning. It worked every time I tried it. And is it a good game? I don't know, right? I've got to go spend about an hour or two. Then maybe I need to go right to the developer and ask them about some of the decisions they've made here. Then I need to think, how do I express that to our audience? How do I express it to the VR download audience of people who, I don't know, you'll deal with a bug or two in order to have a breakthrough brand new experience. But then you're going to come out of it and go, how did that make me feel? Were they good feelings? Were they bad feelings? Like, we have to do that here at UploadVR. We have a lot of reviewers we trust in that we have go spend that time in headset. Developers like Guy, as much as like you're butting heads with David, he's standing in for Meta a little bit to defend them a little bit on like some of their decisions. I think we also empathize entirely with everything devs like Guy have fought against on their side of things, right?
Sure. The other thing I want to say is I think some developers, there are many different developers, and we talk to a lot of them, and some of them have the same views, and some of them have different views. That's the thing I want to say. Developers are not this homogeneous group. There are people who are, really, really successful on Quest right now that are telling us how great things are and how they're having, the highest users they've ever seen and things like that. And then there are other developers who are really struggling, and they're saying about how they're struggling to get exposure and how many of Meta's decisions have harmed them. And I want to avoid saying that there's some homogeneous group, because it's not the case. There are, as in every market, there are people who are currently successful and people who aren't. There are winners and losers. That's the same thing in the audiobooks market, in the movie, in music, in everything in Steam. You go on Steam, and a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, I wish Valve give me some more exposure. I wish Amazon Kindle give me more exposure for my ebook." These are the fundamental issues. Most markets follow a power law distribution where the people at the top get all of the attention and the people at the bottom don't. And it's the same thing with YouTube. YouTubers are often complaining about this, of why is YouTube recommending the big YouTubers to all of the other viewers? Why am they not recommending my channel? This is a fundamental tension between platforms and developers and users. And I don't think it's unique to VR. And I think there are a lot of the same dynamics going on here. I think some of the games you're bringing up are fascinating because we are starting to see some really interesting experimental stuff using some of the newer technologies and capabilities, as you're pointing out. The other thing I want to say that I think feeds into this whole issue of store exposure and certain developers seeing pain is there are some genres in VR that are saturated. There is some genre saturation going on here. One thing that is never brought up in these discussions is that some of these developers are comparing their current success to what they were seeing in 2021 when they were one of the only people on the store and there were nobody else in their genre. There are some genres on Quest where there are 10 or 20 excellent games right now. And that means that whereas 4 years ago, all of the money for that genre would have gone into the 1 or 2 games. Now it's split between 20. And this factor really is never brought up. There are so many incredible games in VR right now. There are 4 years ago, I could have, gone on a 2-week Christmas break and played every VR game I wanted to play, and then come back and said, I've played everything on my list. Today, I would need infinite time. I would need to take a year off. There are so many games that I want to play or finish in VR right now. There is so much to play, and it's better from a user perspective than ever. But that there's only a limited amount of dollars from the consumer. And so I don't understand why no one really brings up this fundamental equation of if there are way more games than you could ever possibly buy or play, that's obviously going to be a very different situation to what there was before. And I think it's a very similar dynamic to Steam.
No, I think we're both saying the same things. And Guy, I appreciate you giving the context of all the other devs out there. Guy is sort of speaking for all the devs behind him that have been struggling with all of these things, and we're speaking for them too, a little bit. These devs are also afraid to speak in many instances because if they make the wrong person mad, maybe they don't get even an inkling of help that they could have hoped on. Like, it's so scary to make a business here in this time, and we understand that, and we are trying to throw our support behind places we like to go, right? Something chess just got added to Walkabout Mini Golf. Fill in your bingo cards, but arguably now I need to review Walkabout Mini Golf in comparison to a chess game in VR. Is it worth it to go, like, if chess.com makes a game that lets me continue in my headset in fully immersive VR and really think about this table right here, and it continues the game that I'm also continuing on my phone, that's competitive to going inside Walkabout and just randomly grabbing these pieces. But what is no longer competitive is like getting locked inside of a chess universe and having to reach the one other Quest owner in the universe who has this chess game and bringing them in to sit down there on the other side of the chessboard. Like, it's a broken model. There has to be another model here.
And to come back to what I was saying, and there's 5 different chess games on the Quest store, and they all want the same buyer. And that's, there are a lot of VR users, but there aren't enough for some of the genre saturation I'm seeing here. At the end of the day, you have to do a basic division here of number of games over number of people, and it does start to get to the point where we're going to have to see more focus and a smaller number of higher quality games to get, rather than just a constant flood. There were many amazing games at the UploadVR showcase this year. I think the feedback I've seen from it has been better than ever, but at the same time, it's just, I wonder if all of them are going to be able to succeed, given there's just so much competition, and the game is just being raised every time, right? Developers are building better and better stuff, and that's and then some of them are free to play, and competing against free to play is tough as well. I think there are so many dynamics here, and people try to come up with a simple narrative for these things, and I just don't think it's that simple. I think this is so multifactorial and so complicated that it's hard
Well,
to distill into one easy rabble-rousing narrative.
yeah, I think that's a beautiful way of taking it. I think everyone wants to jump to there being I think to take away what David's saying here, everyone wants to imagine there's an evil mastermind planning these things, when often it's just a shrewd business decision in defense of being the one true provider of the future. And I have some issues with that thinking, right? Like if you really are open, you allow everyone to play in your ecosystem, and these companies always try to pretend that they are that when there end up being real limits when you dig down into it with them.
Yes. At the same time, I just think a lot of people think that the market provider is somehow able to control the market. Fundamentally, the real mover here is the consumer, the person with the Quest headset who chooses what to buy. And yes, how you surface things to them matters. Of course, it doesn't not matter. But fundamentally, there is no magical way for the provider to make the person buy something they don't want to buy, or to buy two things when they just wanted to buy one thing, or to choose a paid alternative to a free version. These companies follow the consumer demand. The consumer, all fundamentally at the end of the day, is the core driver here, the core mover. And yes, the company's decisions shape these things, but at the end of the day, you know, they are not the real issue here. It's people want what people want, you know?
Yeah. No, I think the last context I just wanted to add here on just what we struggle with here at UploadVR is David said I would need infinite time, and he's speaking to something that is true of virtual reality. There's more virtual reality being made every day than we can get to. And over the last month, it kind of crossed over a threshold for us where quality projects that have been years in development were given to us in every span of time, from weeks to assess to mere hours to assess, before they were released to the public. And even in these were good. These are projects that like years of work went into by quality devs who are trying their best and trying to make dollars in the store. And it was beyond our ability of 3, 4, 5 people, with when you start counting our freelancers, to keep up with. And even today, we've got more things being released in the lead up to Christmas as these devs try to make their one cash cow moment for the year. Like, if they don't get enough money at Christmas time in the next 2 weeks, they have to lay off people next year. They cannot hire people next year. Their projects get canceled. Their projects get delayed. So you have to support these devs. You have to, when you believe in the place that you're going and you think others are going to enjoy it, you got to shout it out. You got to buy a code for your friend. You got to throw your support behind these devs. And after we spend so much time trying to be fair and balanced, right? To try to like be objective about our reporting. I'm trying to be in the middle ground between David and Guy, the creator of Virtual Desktop, and translate for both of you here. But one thing that like isn't debatable, like there's no if you believe in something in VR, go throw your money behind it. Go buy it. Go buy it for someone you love, so that they can experience it. This is if now is not the time for you to buy a new headset, give one of your headsets to somebody else and buy them a few games on that headset and get them going. Be there on board into the best places. Because like part of what David's saying is like, you all are complaining about the algorithm and meta. You should be doing the hard work yourselves of promoting devs you believe in, so that you're not depending on like the algorithm to do this for you. Don't leave it up to meta to let these things die or live. Like I want fantastic contraption too. After all of these years, why don't we live in a world where that happens? Well, we all complain about these games instead of championing them more. Is that yes, Dad, is Crispin. Yeah. I'm gonna keep doing it because there's enough people out there that need to hear this.
Yeah, look, somewhat, but the reality is that the vast majority of people don't purchase things based on wanting to generally support the maker of the thing. They purchase it because they want it. It's like this difference between stated preferences and revealed preferences. And markets are not the aggregate of stated preferences, they're the aggregate of revealed preferences. What people say they want to do with their money and what people actually do with their money are different things. And it's like if they wanted to, they would. If people wanted to buy something, spending a few minutes to look to look through a store, or googling best VR game within this genre and going to see the price, these are not massive barriers. And you could I that's pretty much my take here, that if people trying to tell people to go and support developers just because is great for our community, and I hope people do. I really do hope they do, because I think it's, we want to see these developers thrive. But at the end of the day, that's not how markets work. It's people will buy the things they want to buy, and it sounds so simple and truistic, but it has to be said because it almost isn't taken into account. They will buy the things that they want to buy, and then that will fund who gets to make a sequel. And it's a tough market. It's the same thing in movies, in audiobooks, in music. These are cutthroat markets. Any content market is, where there are so many people vying for the same few consumer dollars. And there are going to be people who make an extraordinary amount of money off it. And there are going to be people who, unfortunately, tragically, are not able to continue to their next project. And I just think people are overstating the role of the market itself in here, the market provider, versus just the actual consumer preferences at the bottom of it.
Yeah, there's so much for us to discuss here. I've kind of just dealt with this in the last week, but I'll just say what I was thinking here. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they just debuted a combat trailer. And it's like, okay, you're showing how Donatello and Michelangelo do your thing. Okay, cool. You're showing 5 seconds of footage for each of these characters. You're not going to convince any VR players out there that this has got great gameplay from just that short snippet of footage. But they've already given me a great demo of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I spent a good half hour down in their lair, and I felt like I was a Ninja Turtle the entire time. I had my my Ninja Turtle fingers that looked like this in my hand. And I'm looking at myself in the mirror. I'm seeing April over there. I'm finding every bedroom of the turtle. Like that's his bedroom. That's his bedroom. I'm seeing all these beautiful touches, and I'm realizing this could be a hangout for me and three friends, and I don't need to go out on missions, right? I just want this hangout with friends. We can shoot hoops over here on this little basketball hoop and make up our own scoring system for the hoop that's in the turtle's lair. And I need to I need to foster a conversation here where it's like, gosh, if you launch your game in early access, you're going to get a one-time shot at turning your wish lists into buyers. Are you going? When is that time? When do you pick the time to turn your wish lists into buyers? Is it January of next year? Is it June of next year? Is it December of next year? How many wish lists do you need in order to bring on an outside investor, in order to fund 2 more years of development? And then maybe you could launch the game with just the cool little home space, and then launch DLC mission packs year after year after year. And I don't know. Like, I don't know if that would work for that dev. But what I am going to air out here on VR Download and for my audience is like that one-time thing where you're trying to turn wish lists into purchases. It maybe worked for games and the scale of games, but it's nightmarish for VR, right? Like that's a recipe for disaster if you're putting all your eggs in one basket of getting enough people on launch day to fund the next 6 months of development. And we need to somehow build another pipeline for VR place development.
Yeah, that is a huge struggle for developers of when to launch, when to go into early access, when to go out into a full release. It's a huge issue because obviously money is going to start running out, but at the same time, in the long term, the impressions that you get when you launch matter, and first impressions last. And no matter how much you update a game, it is incredibly hard to really convince people that things have changed. There's been a few exceptions. Obviously in the wider gaming world, No Man's Sky is a great example of an exception there, but they had to do extraordinarily hard work. I think Bulletstorm VR was a good example in VR, where they kind of had a very weak launch and were able to bring it up to be an excellent game over time. But that takes serious marketing to then be able to tell people about this. I want to actually agree with Guy Godin here in the comments about a factor that isn't being talked about again when I talk about this being a multifactorial issue. I think this is important, is the Horizon Plus subscription, where when you buy a Quest headset, you get 3 months of this. The Best Buy or Costco deal was giving 12 months. This is giving you some of the best games in VR for $8 a month. And that means you have a lot less incentive to then go and buy full-fledged, full-price store games. So that has to be brought in. I think all of these factors come together. People try to really simplify it into, it's just because Meta puts some Horizon Worlds when you first open their feed. That's far too simplistic to be the issue. That's one of the factors, sure. But then you've also got, every Quest headset comes with Horizon Plus, which for 3 months gives you the best VR games, some of the best VR games in the world for free. Then you get them for $8 a month. And then you have a lot of genres that are saturated. Then you have the wider trends into free to play, where some of the big titles like Gorilla Tag are free to play, and Population One and such. And then you also have wider macroeconomic factors that mean people are spending less on these kind of discretionary purchases because of the wider economic factors. And you have all of these different things coming in, and all of them matter, and all of them really, unfortunately, developers in many cases, and again, I keep saying some developers because I talk to a lot of developers, and I talk to some of the developers who are seeing enormous success. And they all, Ian pointed out how some of the developers who aren't seeing success don't want to talk about it because they don't want to see any kind of pushback. But some of the developers who are succeeding in VR are actually also not wanting to kind of talk about it too much because they feel like their fellow developers will kind of criticize them for it and say, why be so positive? We're struggling. So I just want to point out that there are all of these factors happening. This is a power law distribution like every single market. We would love to live in a world where every developer can make something great and be able to fund it forever. I really do. What actually makes all of this sort of every boat rise is when there's more headsets out there in general, because then the percentage of users you get means a larger number of people. And that's why it is so disappointing that Quest headset sales have been down year over year throughout 2025. It's why we need to see content succeed. When you have this saturating subgenres, you need the overall volume of people who are buying these games to get bigger. And that's what I think has actually started to struggle now. Ironically, as we pointed out before, you actually do see higher than ever user numbers overall, higher than ever retention, but you're not getting the big inflow of new users that were happening throughout the Quest 2 era.
I was going to throw out there that I think I saw when we were doing our last show. I was like, is Guy out there? Is Guy in today? I guess he's not tuning in today. And then I later on that day, I noticed that there was a virtual desktop breaking NVIDIA driver change of some kind that Guy was spending the day fixing. And that's the day of a dev. Can you imagine just some platform that I'm working on has changed something and it changes everything for my users? That's such madness to be living in between those shifting tectonic plates, like underneath you all the time. I'm loving our conversation. Nick saying how space should become the new mandatory tacked on mode for new VR games. Someone else out there was saying they just like popping in and out. Someone else saying they suffer from subscription fatigue. I've noticed, what is the situation with tokens inside the Meta ecosystem? What can you use tokens for right now?
I think those are only for Horizon World stuff, and specifically, actually, avatars as well. Avatar clothing, same thing on Steam with Team Fortress 2, right? Hats.
Yeah, see, like I'm not going. My kid put a bunch of virtual currencies on their Christmas list. So, they want Robux, they want some other virtual currency, and I'm going to be giving them Linux computers for Christmas as to try to make a statement here about what is going on. And that's, sorry kids, you get Linux for coal. You get Linux coal for Christmas.
I was gonna say.
No, they're going to get both, but my point is still the same, is that they're going to need to understand that, like, you're putting tokens in the machine, and there's a certain behavior that they're trying to get out of you by putting tokens in the machine. And the fact is, the moment you run out of tokens, you run out of game. And that doesn't feel good, right?
Well, this is where
Like,
gaming started, right? In the arcades, you bought your tokens, right? It's a lot of what is new is or what is old is new again in that sense, right?
no, you're right. It's just, it's also here, kiddo. You own your Pokemon journey, but you don't own anything else here, right? Like, you own the trip along the way, but you don't own the assets that you enjoyed at all anymore. Like, you can't take it out of the system, and now it's all bogged down on a subscription. You lose this game the moment I stop paying my subscription, and I need them to understand that, right? Like,
Yeah,
you the
that's the
thing that you
trade-off.
love, right?
It's the trade-off, but also at the same time, it has its advantages, right? Which is, if we talk about Horizon Plus, for $8 a month, you get this massive library. And for some people, that's worth it. For some people, it's okay that once you buy the coffee and you drink it, the coffee's gone, right? You don't keep the coffee forever. It's a bad analogy in some senses, but it also is a decent analogy. When you go to paintball, you pay money, you have the experience, and that's it.
Yeah.
And
The
it,
cup of coffee isn't my friend, right? Mario's my friend. Zelda's
yeah,
my friend.
I mean, okay, you go to Disneyland, you don't get to stay there, you don't live there, you just buy a right to be there for 3 days. Mickey Mouse
Yeah,
is
I
your
don't.
friend, but you don't get to live there with him. You go home after,
You went straight for the jugular with Disney. I don't own anything at Disney, and I'm gonna like it, right? All right. I think we've company's script in our audience. Now we tried not to be depressing here, and yeah, none of us have an
Look,
economic system to fix this.
I just in defense of subscriptions, okay? I'm always going to be the one defending this here. Obviously, there's some areas in which it's terrible. I am very glad that we live in a world where I can give Spotify 10 quid a month and have access to every piece of music ever made rather than having to go and pay, a quid for a song or fiver for an album. I am very glad that we are in that world. There are obviously differences in different content types, but, you know, do like £120 a year is Spotify, I guess. That's much better value to me than if I had to go and buy every song that I want to listen to. Do I want to have that in games? No. I always want there to before I get shot here, I always want there to be the option to buy. I don't want to ever take that away from anyone. But I also do think it's very important that these subscription services exist because it can be of immense value. It really can. Like coming back to VR, $8 a month for Horizon Plus. Look at some of that stuff there. Walkabout Mini Golf 11, Table Tennis, Demio, Pistol Whip. So many games I can't even mention them all. That's really good value. But I hope that people also go out and buy the game as well.
I like Wabo saying that Mario and Zelda are not my friend. Yeah, I know. I know. You get. I hope you get my meaning from what I'm saying of building a parasocial relationship with a digital character, right? I hope you get that. Yeah, digital currency. It's like real currency, but you can't take it. You can't use it anywhere but one place. Yep.
I see free Skybring up subscriptions can also make revenue very predictable for developers. Yeah, that's a very true thing. It means that you don't have to kind of focus on these fluctuations. You just know you're getting that kind of recurrence. Yeah.
There's a place in VR chat, Namuanki. I can remember it offhand. Namuanki, Namuanki, I think, made by Kevin Mack. I bring it up from time to time. Go search it on VR chat. Go to it on your PC system. I don't think it'll work on Quest. But go to Namuanki in your PC system and just bask in the art that has been built for you by Kevin Mack, one of the artists who's like an Oscar-winning artist. It's a free place. You go there, you can have visions. You press objects, and you're gonna hear some psychedelic music from the 1980s and see some psychedelic shapes around it. You're gonna dive to the bottom of the ocean and go through a cave. It's free, made by one person, a visionary artist who just spit it out into the universe, and it's a place you can go now. There's no game associated with it. There's no economic system. David has spent a whole bunch of this talking about economics. Like, man, you just want to go have a weird trip, you can go have that in VR right now, and there's no game, there's no monetary, and that's what I always come back to, this beauty of this medium, as like, you don't want to make money, you can still make a cool place for people to visit.
Of course you can, but that person has a day job as well that supports them. And if they didn't have that day job, or if they had to, they didn't have the free time, then they do need to. At the end of the day, right? I appreciate that a lot of the things that are made for free are made by people who are able to support themselves otherwise through a day job.
Mm.
And that
You're,
has to be taken into account.
I mean, David, you're describing Simon, Dr. Beef. Dr. Beef has a day job and has personally, single-handedly, not single-handed, he's got a team, but he's personally responsible for making Doom and Doom 3 a place you can go. And a place you can go. You can take a nap there if you wanted to be on Mars in that hellscape. But, like, it's a place you can go. And he did it in his free time. And the beauty of all of this is sometimes that effort in your free time outstrips the $100 million that has been spent by that company over there.
Yeah.
All right.
I think
Anything else?
I was going to say we can agree on this. No amount of money can beat passion. Passion is always going to beat money. I just think the combination of money and passion can beat just passion alone. If imagine someone gave, so obviously they obviously do have Patreon and things like that, and other kind of support that they're getting there that's not being done for free. But imagine some, billionaire or whatever gave him and his team, a bunch of money to quit their jobs and go and build, amazing VR games and experiences that with all of their time. You could imagine even better outcomes there.
So, just to respond to you, you can find an interview with me and Dr. Beef on this channel, in this studio, with older avatars, where I dived into why isn't Meta and others spending money to bring the work that you're doing into VR. And since that conversation happened, things like Flat to VR have coalesced and come together and are actually formally bringing some of these things into VR properly. But make no mistake, it began as a passion project and passion projects. And I was talking to him from that place of passion. And when you go, you can go see that. We've got the receipts for you to go check out. All right. I've had a wonderful conversation with you all. Sorry for the sort of lecture on supporting devs. If I felt a little bit, yeah. If you don't want to support devs, don't support devs, I guess. All right. We'll see you in the future.
Yeah, I think we can both agree. If you do think that a particular VR game is interesting and if you want to see more of something, then yes, you should go and actually buy it, because just saying it's cool does not help the developer. The signal that they get that you want more of it is you buying it. So that's what I think we can all agree on. Thanks so much, everyone.
It's valuable. Yep. See ya.
We'll see you in the future.